Wham!
Alrighty, Dimitri, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So, Dimitri Bianco, are you Italian?
I am. I'm
You
from
are.
Italian ancestry. Yeah, I come from southern Italy, kind of east of Rome.
Ah, very interesting. Do you speak it all or no?
No. I'm third generation, so I guess my great grandfather came over to the U.S. and then it's kind of just died out through the generations.
And so, do you have that whole like 30 jars of tomato sauce in your garage too?
I do, and I even have my own garden. I have tomatoes and peppers and
Really?
yeah, literally everything. I live on 1.25 acre, and I probably have around 400 square feet of just garden space.
Is that a lot of maintenance? The tomatoes?
Yeah, it can be.
So, what do you do on the weekends? You just go and do a little bit of gardening?
Yeah, gardening's definitely part of that. So it's like you got to go out, you got to check everything. So I mean, you plant stuff and you think like it'll be like 2, 3 weeks before it's ripe, and you get out, the birds have already eaten half of your crop, you forgot about it. So it's definitely like pulling weeds, getting out there, checking your produce.
And now, is Italian food your favorite food or no?
Yeah, hands down.
Oh,
Yeah.
hands down. What is like what's your dish if you had to pick a dish?
My favorite dish is I don't even know how to explain it, but it's pasta and it's like a rich, creamy sauce that has like a brie cheese melted into it, and then it has like spicy Italian sausage with it. So you get like the spicy notes, but you also have like that creamy kind of pasta feel to it.
Hands down, I'm gonna say it's pizza. I know it's a little basic, but pizza, it's honestly so good. The best pizza I've ever had, okay? It's a pizzeria in Medford, Massachusetts. I think it's like 10 minutes away from Boston. I went there once. It was just down the street from the Marriott I was staying at, and I was like, okay. I looked on One Bite Pizza, which is the app that Dave Portnoy has,
Uh-huh.
and it had a good rating. So then I went over there, and I was like, okay. I looked on One Bite Pizza, which is the app that Dave Portnoy has,
Uh-huh.
and it had a good rating. So then I went over there. It was by far the best pizza I ever had. I downloaded that app and I gave it like a 9.6. I can't give it a 10 because like ice figure skating rules. Like if I give it a 10, what if there's another pizza that has a better rating than that? So I can't give it a better score than that. But 9.6 because it was like by far the best pizza I've ever had. Bacon and sausage pizza I always get. I have every Friday, which I'm having tonight because today is Friday.
I
But
gotcha.
I wanted to congratulate you on the vest because vest. I don't think people understand this, at least for me personally, because
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I told you this. I don't think I have, but not this summer, but the following summer before that, I interned for a very small cryptocurrency firm on Wall Street. So I got to dress the part, which was very, very cool. And
Yeah.
every day I would show up in my three-piece suit. And then sometimes I change it up. Sometimes I just wear the suit and tie. But I like the three-piece just because it's different. No one wears it anymore. And I was walking down. So where I worked, you said you used to work in New York, right?
Yeah. I worked on Wall Street too.
Okay. So when you walk by the stock exchange, like when you're passing by like Deutsche Bank and all that nonsense,
Uh-huh.
the stock exchange is on your right. Walk a couple blocks down, 110 Wall Street, that big WeWork. That's where I worked.
Okay.
That big black building. Okay. So every time I walk by, like that little like Wall Street area where everyone takes pictures and stuff, I'd have people come up to me and either ask me to donate money to the nonprofit. That's where I worked.
Okay.
That big black building. Okay. So every time I walk by, like that little like Wall Street area where everyone takes pictures and stuff, I'd have people come up to me and either ask me to donate money to the nonprofit, or I would have some people pitch me their business ideas. I'm sure you've got that too sometimes. It's crazy, but it was
Yeah.
so funny because I'm pretty young, I would say. I hope so. But um, when I was there, I would have these people come up to me and they would try to kind of start conversation with you. They're like, hold on a second. Let me guess how old you are. You're 25. And I was like, I'm 19. And they're like, what? You're 19? it's so funny, but that made me realize that internship, like not the work itself, but like the interactions I would have every day, because this happened on a daily basis, which is kind of annoying if I'm like on a rush. Like they kind of stop you. I don't want to be late, and it's like, yeah. Like I saw you yesterday. Like look, I'll stop by like when I get my burrito from like that food truck I come to. Like you can meet me there if you want. Um, but it made me realize how different people treat you when you like dress the
Mhm.
part. So for example, there's a bank that there's a Wells Fargo bank. Um, but it made me realize how different people treat you when you like dress the part. So for example, there's a bank that there's a Wells Fargo bank that lives about 10 minutes away from me. So I live in Wilton, Connecticut. I've been living here since I moved here around like 7th grade. Same bank, I still go there today. Okay. So during that same internship, I went to deposit some money one day. Or no, I went to take out money one day. And I went in there, and the same branch manager has been working there since I moved there. Because I go there all the time, or I used to when I was working like my friend's pizzeria, to deposit some money and take out money. And he's seen me like for the past like 8 years I've been like living here. He's never said a word to me. The one day I come dressed up in a suit, before I even walk in, he's coming to me and he's like, "Hello, my name is Doug Malone. I just want to thank you for using our institutions today. Is there anything we can help you with? Like if you need water, let me know." In my head, I was like, "Oh, you mean?" I'm like, now you're finally asking me after like the 7 years I've been coming here. But it's so funny because like there's so many instances where like stuff like that happens. There's another time where I was going to an interview and I took an Uber from the airport, and I just had my Sacramento Kings backpack because I'm a big Sacramento Kings fan. I love
Mhm.
basketball. But this Uber driver, and this never happened. Usually you call an Uber, and then you get in the car, and then you're done.
Yeah, just silent.
Exactly. Right. Before I even get in the car, they see me in my suit. They get out of the car to take the backpack off of my back and then put it in the trunk. I'm like, no, you're good, you're good. I like my backpack. I'll keep it on me. But it's just so funny because if I was wearing just like a polo or just like a t-shirt, if I was going to play some basketball and I took an Uber or something, that would never happen. In fact, the guy would want nothing to do with me. But look, I mean, hey, like if you put in extra work, you might get an extra reward. Like working for the extra tips. Like I respect it. I mean, there's more. The more risk you take, the more reward. So
Yeah, New York, whenever I would be in a suit just walking around town, the tourists would always stop you and ask you for directions. I'd always get it like, "Oh, do you know where, Times Square is and how do you get to here?" I would go on a weekday, I don't know, taking a day off, I'd be like in a t-shirt and jeans. Nobody talks to you, nobody cares. And like getting on the subway, right? You're running for the subway and you're running late to work and you're trying to get on. In the suit, people would like hold the door, which is not New Yorker at all for you when you're in the suit. When you're like on the weekend, like sprinting, it's like, nope, everybody's like leans way back as the doors close and they're like, "See ya." And like getting on the subway, right? You're running for the subway and you're running late to work and you're trying to get on. In the suit, people would like hold the door, which is not New Yorker at all for you when you're in the suit. When you're on the weekend, like sprinting, it's like, nope, everybody like leans way back as the doors close and they're like, "See ya." There's like a sense of like power, I feel like, that comes from a suit, because I remember these kids, and like I'm a kid too. I'm pretty young. I mean, like I was walking by these people who were around the same age as me, and I didn't really say anything. Like I had my headphones on, minding my own business. I'm grooving, I'm walking, and these kids were kind of like, I guess like doing some monkey business, and then like I walk by them, they're like, "Oh, my apologies, sir." And I was like, I would never say that to someone who's like my age. I'd be like, "Oh, sorry, dude. Like I didn't see you. Like my bad." Yeah.
But it's just funny. There's just so much associated with it, and that's honestly why when I have the chance, no matter what it is, if I have an excuse to wear a suit, I'm gonna wear a suit, because I'm a big like first impressions last kind of person. First impressions are a very powerful thing, and that's kind of why whenever I can wear a suit, I mean, I'm not actually wearing a suit, I'm wearing a vest, but like you get the point. Like if I can dress the part and look nice, like I'm gonna do it. That's how for sure.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference. Even at like I guess every bank I've worked at, there's never really been like a shirt and tie policy. But everywhere I go, I always wear the suit. I always have the vest on. I always have the jacket and everything. And people always ask me, like, "Dimitri, why are you wearing a vest? This makes no sense to me." And I'm like, vests are so versatile. So sometimes I don't go in a jacket at all because it's like, I don't know, 105 degrees in Dallas. So it's like you still want to look like you have like a two-piece suit of some sorts on. So you got to have the pants and then the vest because now it's like you still have a jacket, but it allows you to like breathe and get around. And then in the wintertime, you're cold. So then you wear a vest underneath, which keeps the core of you warm, and then you have the suit jacket. It's like I don't need a winter coat or anything in New York.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's so funny that you say that because banks are starting to roll back some of those like strict like suit and tie policy, but I like it honestly. And it makes no
Yeah.
sense like when people ask you like why are you wearing a suit and tie? I'm like, well, the person that's probably saying that is probably wearing a shirt and a tie anyways. So it's like it's almost like why not just bring the jacket with you? Because opportunities will come like no matter what. I mean, like you never know what doors like, or you can like walk across someone that maybe works or maybe is a managing partner at Goldman. Like you just don't know. So you just have that jacket on you. I mean, just roll it over your arm and just walk around with it. I mean, it's like less than. I mean, it weighs just as much as like maybe like two staplers. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But
And you look ridiculous though when you have on like the puffy like North Face jacket or something, and then it's like you have suits, pants on, and boots, and it's like you take it off, and it's like this outfit doesn't go together. Why are you like dressed down?
that is such a San Francisco like tech kind of like outfit. Like I'm pretty sure at some companies in San Francisco, I think some of the big like maybe the FANG companies too, it's actually required that you have like a Patagonia like vest. And I'm like, that's so ridiculous. I mean, like I'll wear a Patagonia vest in the winter at like a bar or something. I'm not gonna wear it to work.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you know, gotta look the part.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm completely with you. I was just like, I don't know. It's like if you're gonna dress one way, like you're going to work, dress like you're going to work, and it's like if you're gonna be just like casual and relaxed on the weekends,
If I'm gonna go
just
to a
dress
golfing
casual.
tournament,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to a golfing tournament. I'll make sure to bring my Patagonia up. I'm not gonna bring it to work. But
Exactly.
what's it called? So for this suit, I'm not sure if you've done this before, but or I'm not sure if you do this, but for me, I don't wear like for my undershirt, I don't wear like a typical cotton white t-shirt because what happens is, especially in New York, since there's so many people walking next to you and it's so humid walking,
Yeah.
you sweat pretty easily. And so sometimes it leaks kind of through onto your collared shirt, and that's a very bad thing. But thank God it's never happened, or it probably has, but you can't see it because I'm wearing a vest, and that's also another pro of it. But
Oh yeah.
do you wear a cotton white t-shirt? Because what I do, I wear one of those like Nike performance kind of things where it kind of like if I'm sweating, it won't really drench onto my t-shirt, and it's like more like breathable.
I don't. It's kind of a personal preference. I always feel like the shirt restricts you underneath. And then the other piece is like I have colleagues. So if you have nicer shirts, all right, you can't see through them, which is awesome. But I have like people I ran into, colleagues and stuff, they have like that thin, really just paper thin, super cheap shirt. And you can see the t-shirt underneath. And it
Right
just
here.
drives me nuts.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
See, I thought about it too when I first did it, but then someone told me like I didn't even know that until you pointed that out to me. So I feel like it's more like a self-conscious thing.
Probably.
Dimitri, I wanted to ask you because we had a very interesting conversation about MBAs, and you told me something very interesting. So I just want to follow up on that. So you were saying that unless you go to like a top 25 school or like a top 30 school, this is for MBA. For MBA, it's not worth getting it. And so can do you want to touch upon that, like maybe why that is, and like maybe let's say if I live in Wisconsin and then I get my MBA from the University of Wisconsin, are there some exceptions where maybe like locally the program kind of has some recognition and maybe there's some exceptions, or is it still kind of like if you're gonna pay like $100,000 to maybe $250,000, then don't even bother like do your CFA if you're doing investments or something?
Yeah. So MBA is always the hot topic, and nobody wants to talk about it. But the biggest thing I don't think people realize is like the education you get with an MBA is no different than your undergrad. So I have a BBA in finance. I came from a generic state school, like a no-name school. Probably no one's heard of Washington State University, right? We're the Cougars. We're always like the worst at football. We're the baby brother school in Washington State, right? Everyone wants to go to UW. And then a buddy of mine who went to grad school, he went to, I think, like Southern Florida, some other generic no-name school in Florida, and he had a BBA in finance as well. And then we went to Michigan and we took classes at Ross, which is, top 25 MBA program. I don't know, super snooty. Everybody wants to be this like executive and partner at these consulting firms. And so we went and we took the classes and we took one on, we were required to take one on equities. So we're like, all right, awesome. This will be a fun class to take. We took the class. It was literally the exact same material we both took at two generic state schools. And we nailed the class. I've never gotten 100% in the class. 100%. We had a trading competition. We won the trading competition at bonus points. So we had like technically more than 100% for the entire class. It was like an A+, whatever they give you.
And that's at Michigan,
like, okay,
right?
This is just, yeah, it's at Michigan. This is like a top name school. So it should be like cream of the crop. And then we took other finance classes like fixed incomes, and we took like a derivatives course. And it was the same thing. It's like, I've already taken all of this material. Why am I paying you, right, for this education? That'd be a ton of extra money. And so I started talking to the students, and the MBA students would be telling me, Dimitri, it's so complicated, and these classes are so challenging, and like the MBA programs just really stroke their ego on like they're the best and the brightest. And I think what the issue is that the MBA is really good for networking.
Yeah.
Right. And we were a joint program. So we were so this program doesn't exist anymore, but the financial engineering program they used to have was halfway between engineering and Ross Business School. And they wanted us kind of in their program, but they wouldn't give us all of the actual benefits. So for example, Goldman Sachs would come and they'd be interviewing students. We were not allowed to interview with them.
What?
So they would cut us out. We weren't allowed. And then like consulting firms would come, we could kind of be there. But like when Amazon came, it's like, oh, fine, you can go and talk to Amazon, but we don't really care. But we couldn't get any of the big names, and it was really frustrating. And we started realizing like the entire point of that MBA is for the networking contacts. Like that managing partner would come down and talk to you from BlackRock, right, or Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan, and they'd say, oh, you're a Ross graduate. I graduated from Ross as well. And you'd have like this really good kind of behind closed doors conversation on how we're all really smart people because we have the MBA. And so it was always frustrating because it's like we're outperforming all these MBA grads, right? We're just going through the classes like a joke, and yet you can't get the interviews. And so for the MBA portion, it's like if you want to get into these big name firms that are predominantly ran by MBAs, you have kind of a snooty kind of gate you have to get through. And so you basically have to get that Wharton MBA, that Kellogg MBA. You have to have that top name to get there. So that's kind of the big goal like you should shoot for. Now on localness, so localness is huge. So I live in Dallas. I don't feel any of the educational systems here are like top notch by any means, but you'll see it like a lot of the big names around here, the big banks, they like to hire local. So all the big name banks, global firms have offices in Dallas. And a lot of times you'll see a lot of Texas graduates all working at these banks. And that just comes down to the local piece. So I think if, for example, let's say you grew up in, I don't know, like I'm in Washington State, there's nothing around. If you want to work like in Chicago, try to find an MBA program in Chicago. And perhaps it might not be the best top 25 name, but you can definitely leverage that as a local piece.
And so what classifies as local? Because I think, as you know, I live in the tri-state area. So that might be kind of an exception. So let's say if someone went to get their MBA from the University of Connecticut, but they want to work in Manhattan, would that be considered local, or is that kind of like it should be kind of like in like the same state, kind of local?
So tri-state, I think all three you can work together. So if you're in Connecticut somewhere, or in like New Jersey or New York, you kind of have that, I guess that balance. Everyone feels like they're part of the same kind of area. So I feel like it's easy to get people to come interview. Michigan's a great example of one of those challenges. Like if you look at a map, you have Chicago on one side and you have New York way on the other side, but we're stuck in the middle. So if you went to like Michigan State or I don't know, Eastern Michigan or something, you got an MBA, it's really impossible to get to Chicago or to get to New York because that distance is so far. And I think for most places, right, being out of state does make that a challenge. If you're in like a state over, and it's not the tri-state or it's not California, it's just really hard to get a job other places.
Dimitri, I remember because I think I remember before I reached out to you, I actually started watching your YouTube channel first. And I think I recall watching one of your videos. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so you finished you did not finish the financial engineering program, correct?
Correct.
But you had a software engineering background, I'm assuming, beforehand. So I'm just curious as to where that background came from, because it's my understanding that your background is mainly business related, but then when you won't really know you have a software kind of background unless you watch your YouTube videos.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know. So I have a weird background. So in high school, I hated school and didn't want to do anything.
Everyone did.
I didn't want to go to college or anything. I was like, I'm done with this. But I went to college. My father worked in business, so I figured, why not just take the easy route, go into business? It's something I kind of known. Like I've talked to him about business as a kid. I'll go into finance. It sounds like fun. And then I graduated with my finance degree. But during that time, I was actually working for a startup firm behind the scenes. And it was so small, like you have to do everything. So we didn't have a choice. Like we needed like a website built, for example. We didn't have the money to pay anybody. So it's like you just self-teach yourself CSS and HTML, and I just did it in the background. And then after we did that, then it's like I had to do marketing analytics. So I'm like doing marketing analytics behind the scenes. I have no training on this. And it kind of pushed me more towards looking at like statistics a little more. But a lot of my focus that I wanted to do was like automation for the firm. And so I was already teaching myself C++ and I've been doing it for maybe 3 or 4 years before I even got to my master's program. So for me, it's like I look like the worst candidate. I have a business degree in finance, which is not qualified for a financial engineering master's. And then I start the program. And for me, I already have a lot of the like computer science background. I've read a ton of books, watched a lot of YouTube videos, actually had hands-on programming experience. So for me, that was my strength. My biggest weaknesses was more on the math side. And then statistics was like easier to pick up because it was that combination of like financial theory and a little bit of math, but it was a lot of programming as well. And so that was kind of where I shined in the program.
For the math aspect of things, do you think that's really important in finance? Like, aside from you needed to understand like some like the Black-Scholes models and some of the complicated aspects of it. But like in terms of applying something like yourself, like do you think it's really necessary? Or is it mainly used just to understand some of the theories that are already out there, and like statistics is more like the way to go?
So you're kind of hitting it on the head here. I think if you want to work in derivative pricing, the math is hands down like required of everything. So that financial engineering, Black-Scholes, that side of it. That industry though is kind of shrunken and died away after 2007, 2008. There's just not as many derivative products being sold. So that the math part's kind of getting less and less important. And I think you need to know enough math to be able to understand the statistics and the theories and the proofs. Because a lot of times, like you'll read a textbook and it'll say like, these are the following conditions, and they give you one equation. But I don't think a lot of students realize like that one equation, if you tear it all apart, all those assumptions and theories behind it that are required are baked into that. So I think math is becoming slightly less important. I think stats is kind of overruling that. But to really grasp that, you do need to have some math background to work through the problems and kind of prove to yourself mentally why it works and why it doesn't.
And so, did you take a bunch of math courses in your undergraduate, or did you also teach yourself that?
No, so my story is I took the general business classes, which was like through calculus 1, and then I think I took like a business math class or some nonsense, which is like, I don't know, algebra and whatever. And then economics I took like optimization theory. So I was more into the math side of the economics. And then when I went to grad school, I was vastly underprepared. And so I took the first semester in financial engineering, and the math courses, even for like the students with, a math undergrad or an engineering undergrad, we were all spending like 40, 50 hours a week doing homework.
Really?
Yeah. And so so this is the issue they had. The program was requiring us to take 6 courses. So for an MBA program, like Ross didn't understand that because they took 6 courses, but your course load and the amount of work you did was really small. So doing 6 was just like doing an undergrad, right? Not very stressful. For every other master's out there, so statistics, math, engineering, anything like that, you're only allowed to take between 3 and 4 classes
Per semester?
per semester.
Okay.
So we were double loading. So it was like, we were thankful for taking the business classes because it was like this nice breather of like an hour of homework when we were done for the week. where the math courses, you were spending like 20, 30 hours just like crunching through numbers. And so even the students that were technically prepared were like vastly struggling. One of them had health issues and ended up having to go back to their home country because they weren't even sleeping with the amount of work they were doing.
Jesus.
And then you have two business students there, me and another guy, and we're super struggling because like we have to catch up on all this undergrad material and then on top of that do the actual work. So it was a nightmare. So at the end of the first semester, I thought about it and thought, I can finish this and I can have the degree, but if I don't understand the material very well, like no one's going to hire you. You're not going to perform very well in a career. So I was trying to figure out how do I keep my financial engineering studies, but then slow down the pace and not have to rack up another semester or 2 semesters of, you know, what, $20,000, $30,000 in tuition. So for me, I ended up doing an applied economics degree. And one of the big advantages was we could still take stats and math courses. And since I was already accepted in financial engineering, they didn't let students take those classes, but I was the exception since I was already part of both programs. So I could take anything I wanted. And then they allowed me to take, there's only 5 core courses and everything else was an elective. So my electives were financial engineering electives, which is awesome. So it's kind of like a financial engineering degree, but I could slow it down. And then I took a semester off after my first semester in financial engineering. And I just spent an entire semester self-studying Calculus 2, Calculus 3, ODEs and PDEs, and try to catch up as much as possible. So I was always in the library like studying, even though I wasn't even going to school at the time. And then by the time I got into that next semester, then I finished out my last 2 semesters in applied economics. So
I think that's important.
Not a fun journey.
I think that's important what you just said. So let's say like I am interested in doing finance engineering. I mean, I'm really not. I mean, to be honest, just throw that out there. Yeah. But let's say I am, hypothetically speaking, and I wanted to teach myself math. Because math is a little bit complicated because you can't exactly, like, there's not many videos on it because, like, not many people are very, like, interested in it, unfortunately, even though I think it's important. But let's say I wanted to. What did you do? Like, what resources did you use? Like, I think you have some of those, like, on, yeah, I think you have some videos on, like, what books, like, to do. But, like, for that specific time period, like, what did you do? And, like, what, like, resources did you use, like, et cetera?
So I think it's like a minimum requirement. You have to have a textbook. I don't think you can learn math without it.
Really?
And the reason I think math is so hard to learn is that math has to build layer by layer. So if you miss just one layer, everything on top of that now makes no sense. So you're like struggling to figure out where the gaps are. For me, I went and found, I don't even remember, a buddy of mine had me use a book he had at Ohio State University. And it was like Calc 1 to 3. And it was like, I don't know, 1,200 pages or something ridiculous, this massive textbook. So I'd borrow that from him and study that. And then before I met him, I was just in the library and I found a few math books and I would just start at the beginning and just start working through it. Because I'm always terrified I'm going to be missing something. And then when you go to learn later, like it's not going to make sense, but you're not going to understand why you don't get it. So for me, self-learning math is something you have to do in order. It has to go from like Calc 1 and you have to go through the entire book. And then you have to do Calc 2 and go through the entire book and then go to Calc 3. For online resources, though, there's Patrick JMT.
Yeah, so he's the man.
You know, he makes things so much simpler.
So much simpler. And
so you need to read, I think, the textbook to get the background, the understanding, all the detailed information. But then when you get stuck and you're like, this makes no sense, then you can reach out to like Patrick JMT's videos and see like, oh, like I didn't carry the 1 over, or I didn't cancel out this term when I was simplifying. So I think you have to have that tandem of kind of online support resources, but you definitely need those textbooks.
You know what I never understood till this day, and so many people do it. When I'm at school, so these schools, I mean, it's such a money grab, honestly, but they're emailing you to buy their books from the bookstore, and they're charging like a ridiculous amount of money. I'm talking like $150 for a book. And this is like true for like any book. $150 per book, right? So people are spending like $700 per semester on books when I spend maybe $100. Yeah. For extra books too, like books that I don't even need. Like I'm talking like the optional books, like they don't like just because like I can. for like $10 on Amazon, like just to rent it. And some people rent it and it's still like hundreds of dollars. Like I don't understand that. It's really
Yeah,
like it's so unfortunate.
the university system's messed up on the books part because I remember I just discovered Amazon when I was like an undergrad. So I'd already paid for all those books for like the first 2 years, 2 years, 3 years. And then I remember I got a notification on my phone. I think it was like a week or two ago because this was the beginning of school year, started in September-ish.
Hmm.
And I remember posting, I just paid like $450 for books. And I saved like over like $600 from buying it at the bookstore. And it's just amazing that you can go online and get the same book for significantly cheaper versus going to the university system. They have this massive markup in there, I guess, to pay for students, I don't know, to sit there and hand you books or something.
Yeah, it's because they're underfunded. That's why. Massively underfunded. So they charge you $700 a semester. And the
Yeah.
bulk companies too, man. I mean, sometimes like they're charging, especially when you get to the graduate courses, because like I've tried. It's so funny. Like I watched some of your videos, and then so like just a little trick. So I think it's also true for almost like any topic. To be honest, you need to have a textbook because one, you need to have mainly for one they have table of contents, so they have like list by list like the topics and stuff, and I think that's important because it gives you like a roadmap of what you need to do. So what I used to do, and I was like, I'm a very self-starter too, like a very big self-starter. Like I also taught myself how to program, but I also taught myself everything I know about business. Like I interned as an institution asset management summer analyst at PNC this summer, but I'm taking my first business course like this semester, literally.
No.
So oh, I lost my um wow, I actually just lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
Talking about self-learning and textbooks.
Yes, thank you. So what I do is I figured that, okay, if I know the textbook to buy, then I'm set. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to buy a textbook, I'm going to use it from a school, like a very good school. Because as long as I'm reading the same textbook as the other students, then I'm on the same boat. I'm fine. So Princeton University has a course catalog and it's public. You can look up any of their courses, whether it's chemistry, calculus, biology, any course they have, even Korean if you want to learn Korean or something. They have you click on the class and it has the listed course materials, and I'll have the textbooks too. And so that's what I'll do. I'll look there because I figured that as long as I know the books that they're using, then I'm pretty much on the same boat. And so that's what I'll do because I think that's really important to know, like to have good resources, because honestly, resources can make or break you, in my opinion, sometimes.
Oh yeah. And I get the textbooks are expensive and students always complain to me or people on the YouTube channel like, Dimitri, I can't afford this book. I look at them and think your time should be worth far more than the book.
Yeah.
Like I have a book I spent, I think $120 on. This book. Introductory Econometrics, A Modern Approach by Jeffrey Wooldridge. And it's
It's a huge book.
and in school we used like, I don't know, probably like a third of the book at most. And you never cover all the material in the book. And I use this every single day at work. And people like are at work are doing stuff and I'm like, nope, that's wrong. And people are like, Dimitri, don't tell me it's wrong. And so I'm like, hold on, let me grab my book. And I just I know the exact page numbers. So I know where all the material is and it's all highlighted. But it's like to work through a book like that, it should take you at least like a year. And that book's like 850 pages.
I have that book.
You have that book?
I have any book that you have. I probably have. Like after this, I'll show you some of the books I have. I promise you, I have so many books. Like I have books on the floor. Like that's how many books I have. Like I have an actual bookshelf that I've used up. Then like under the desk, I'm doing this like podcast right now. I have stacks of books. And then next to my TV, I also have books. And then I have some in my closet. And I still don't have enough room. I have that book.
You have that book?
I have any book that you have. I probably have. Like after this, I'll show you some of the books I have. I promise you, I have so many books. Like I have books on the floor. Like that's how many books I have. Like I have an actual bookshelf that I've used up. Then like under the desk, I'm doing this like podcast right now. I have stacks of books. And then next to my TV, I also have books. And then I have some in my closet. And I still don't have enough room. Like I've gone like, there are some days I used to do, and this was like during like the phase during the time of my life where I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I also had zero experience. And I'm not sure, maybe everyone's not in the same boat boat on this. But when you don't have any experience, you don't give, like, you really couldn't care less what your first internship is. You just need to get it. So no matter what it is, even if it's like a IT guy, like just like marking check boxes, like you'll do it. And so that's what I was at. And I was like, okay, well, I have a lot of free time. So I'm going to look up a bunch of books, or I'm going to pick something that I think could get me into something. And that was why I taught myself software engineering, because I kind of came across this idea that there are some people who work at large tech companies who don't have a degree. And I'm like, how is that possible? And two, can I do it? Probably not, because those people usually probably hack into some government agency, then work for them, and then they're probably very sophisticated people. There's some very crazy, smart, savvy people in tech, and so I figured that's probably unlikely. But at least I know for a fact I can teach myself how to program, and so I did that. And so I figured that was probably the easiest way. So that's how my career started. I started one of Capital One software engineering programs.
Okay.
And the way I did it is they sent me like or I applied, and then out of like the 300 people that they selected, they gave us all like an assignment, and they're like, okay, we're gonna send you an Excel sheet that's about 800,000 like cells. Is that what you call Excel? I don't really use Excel that much, right? But 880,000 cells, which is a lot. And so it took me like 10 minutes just to download the thing. And then they're like, we're gonna give you a couple questions, just do something interesting with it. And so I just made like a web base, and it was like pretty interactive. I showed some graphs, and like the data, it was like start time, end time, like how long the trip was, because it was about bike shares. So it's like how many people, it's like bike shares in California, or no, Los Angeles. And it's like, okay, like X amount of people use bike shares, X amount of people use bike shares during this time. This is the average trip time. Or no, that's what I had to find out. Like, it was basically like, okay, this person took a trip time for like 10 minutes. This person took 80 minutes. So I was like, okay, like I figured out the average. I'll figure out where like the most frequent like travel locations are. I'll pinpoint that on the map. I'll use Plotly to show that, and like, et cetera, et cetera. So I did that. And then they're like, congratulations, we can bring you down to Richmond, Virginia. And I was like, let's go.
Yeah.
Honestly.
That's awesome.
And it wasn't like an official internship, because it was like it's more like one of those pre-internship programs. But I was like, I don't care, I'll take it, because this is something. And so I ended up leveraging that to get my job at the the cryptocurrency firm on Wall Street. And I was like, boom, I'll get that. But where I'm going with that basically is, I remember I watched one of your videos where you're talking about why professionals don't talk to you.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how when people ask you for advice and you want to know how they did it, sometimes it's just kind of like, look, like I got lucky. I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes it really is about luck. Like, it really is. Like, sometimes you get just so lucky that it's like, you know what? Someone has to be the luckiest person in the world. I don't know if I am, but I'm just happy it just kind of worked out this way.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem I have with professionals a lot of times when they give advice is that, so take like your story, right? They would do that and just say like, I just got lucky, like things just happened. But they never acknowledge the point of like doing all the self-studying beforehand, teaching yourself how to program, reading all these books, right? Most of the people I feel like that ask the question like, Dimitri, how do I get this job, or how do I do X, Y, and Z? It's like they haven't put any effort in.
Yeah.
So it's like, did you do any self-learning? And they're like,
What have you done?
well, no.
It's like, what have you done? Like, so you want to be a software engineer. So have you gone on HackerRank? Like, have you gotten a software engineering interview? Like, what problems do you struggle with? Like, is it like dynamic program? Is it tree graphs? Like, what exactly is it? Do you know? And it's kind of it's kind of like very ambiguous. Like, you don't really know. Like, you just want to know, like, okay, like if I get some sort of like advice, like at least that's something. Or like, maybe like if I kind of like cozy up to the person, like maybe if he likes me enough, maybe he'll bring me on like on some side gigs, maybe he'll offer me a full-time job or something, like, put me to work as manager, like something like that, which is highly unrealistic, because especially what I notice in the business world, let's call it, mine is consulting, because I'm going to consider consulting its own firm, or its own kind of field, mainly because when you reach out to people on LinkedIn, and I think this is true for me personally, when I reach out to people, I don't think a single person I would consider business is actually like answered me back. I've had attorneys reach back out to me, which is crazy. Attorneys, I've had people consulting. Tech is probably, like, if you want to reach out to people on LinkedIn, people in tech will just message you just because they have so much free time. I mean, they get off at work at like 3:30 and they get paid six figures. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's just a weird industry, I think, in general. Like, business is very, I think it's just dying. I think part of the issue is there's like this kind of the secret wall of like, you need the credentials, you need the degrees. But now it's like, if you look at like a lot of the business programs, they're vastly struggling. So MBA numbers for applications every year is falling.
So they're kind of struggling on that end.
And then all of a sudden now they're teaching programming. Like, somehow if you know how to program in Python, you're going to be as good as a computer scientist. And I always laugh because I'm like, all right, so say you have the finance side and you can program. You're still worthless in quantitative finance, which is where they all want to come now. Because like, you need to have statistics and math to generate like ideas and theories. Kind of like your example with doing your data in Excel. You have to have an idea. Like, you have to generate that process and think, start times, end times, writing durations, where are they going? Like, you have to think all this through. And I think the business side just doesn't teach that scientific process and rigor of like, okay, I have data, I need to build a model. What are the problems? How do I define it? And so even if I could teach every business student out there to be an expert in Python,
Highly unlikely.
Yeah, they can't do anything. They can't generate those ideas.
And I think that's the challenge with the business programs, is they see that they're dying out. And I think one of the reasons is that they've saturated the market where they're at. So business degrees are awesome for doing like investment banking, for doing like corporate finance, for example, which I did for a few years, right? There are all these areas they're really good at. And a lot of it's people driven, and they do some analytics, but it's not like hardcore, math and stats that you're going to need like Calc 2, 3, and, stochastic calculus for. It's just simple analytics, and it's working with people, and it's putting together basic business ideas. That's where they shine. And I would hands down hire a business person every day to do that. In like accounting, for example, is super specialized, right? You get an accounting degree, you memorize all the rules they have and all the regulations for your country. You need an accountant to do that. And so I think they need to focus on that. But I think the issue is they have so many people now getting business degrees that it's like they can't place them. So now they're trying to figure out, kind of like the trading and equity research realm is drying up for them, and they're hiring quants now. So it's like, so how do they capitalize on that market? And so now I think they're shifting to the programming side, trying to do it. But I helped some MBAs with some coding, and it was like how to import data,
How to read data from a server.
They couldn't figure out how to get their charts plotted, so I had to help them figure out how to put it into a plot. It's like simple things. And it's
Email a PDF.
Yeah, and I think the other issue too is when you get a degree and you get like one area of focus, people fail to realize you've spent years on one topic.
Yeah.
So like a business degree is too generalized. Like, you took a little bit of finance, a little bit of management, a little accounting. Now you took like, I don't know, a semester or two of Python classes. Like, you're not going to compete with the Python guys because they have, either they've self-studied for years and years and years, they have tons of experience, or they have that undergrad, which is 2 solid years of studying only computer science. Or you try to compete with the quants who have, a lot of math, but it's like
Most quants have a 4-year undergrad.
in something like math or engineering. And then on top of that, then they went on to get a $70,000 to $100,000, $150,000 master's degree where they only studied quant finance for another 2 years. And then you look at a business student, it's like, you're so general, you've never focused too much of your time in one area. And so they're really good at doing management roles, but they can't do the technical part. I think that's where the big struggle is with the business programs. And I see a lot of them are going to be failing in the future because they're so focused on trying to diversify in other areas now. Instead of realizing like, we're really good at this, let's just be really good at this.
Diversification, that's so funny. But yeah, I think I totally agree with that. And I think the problem with business too, and I think maybe it's like kind of like a cultural thing. It's kind of like I'm kind of like right, and it makes sense because I'm hedging against risk. Like I'm being introduced to more things, but it's kind of like, okay, but like when you get into like the knit and grits of things, it's kind of like, well, you're kind of like not my guy if I need to come to you because you just don't know enough.
Yeah, I mean, I guess trading is probably the best example of this. You have a lot of professionals and they tell you, I'm an expert, I've been doing this for X amount of years. So it's like, don't challenge me. Like, don't tell me how to do it. And I think it's a really business attitude.
Yeah.
And I worked multiple banks, no specific bank, but industry-wide, you'll run into people that are so-called like an expert. Like they could be like a senior manager or an analyst or whatever, and they could say, I've done this for 25 years. I've only worked in this one area. And they'll tell you something like, this is how you need to build a model, because we build models for them. And I come back and say, there's no relationship between those, so we're not going to do it. And then they'll fight you and they'll say, Dimitri, you don't know anything. You know, I'm like a senior director of X, Y, and Z. This is how the industry works. This is it. So you start bringing all this data to them. You show them, look, there's no correlation. There's no relationship. And then they keep arguing with you and you say, hey, hold on. This relationship existed 5 years ago in the data. It's not there anymore in the data. So you need to we're going to figure out something that's similar that makes business sense and logic. So we're going to keep appeasing you. We're going to build something that makes a lot of common sense, but you have to have the data to back it. And I think that's that technical piece where they don't like to give up the control and say, you know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the markets have changed. Maybe the industry's changing. Maybe it's different. And I think that's where the quant finance realm is kind of pushing out traditional finance in a lot of areas, is we're not saying we're experts on it. We're looking at data and numbers and trying to figure out that pattern and that kind of rationality.
It's a lot of confirmation bias for sure, and I think that's a huge problem. It's kind of like, I'm just kind of bringing you in just so you can just like be my yes man.
Yeah. And we've been treated poorly. I won't say where I worked, but I worked somewhere and we had a meeting and senior management came in and they basically told us like, you're the quants, you're going to sit down and do the crunching of the numbers. And when you're done with that, let us know. We have actual work to do.
So there's like this very demeaning, like kind of culture and atmosphere of like,
we're the business people, we're senior management, we're the ones making the money here. You're just kind of providing support. And it's like, I think that's some of the problems some of the institutions have and why they don't do so well.
And so is that why you decided to leave? I'm not sure if I'm getting this right, but is that why you left traditional finance?
Yeah, so it's part of it. So traditional finance was great. I wanted to work on Wall Street.
Everyone did.
Like every finance student, I wanted to dress in a three-piece suit and be the trader on Wall Street.
Be on Squawk on the street.
Yeah. I had a professor though who was an industry practitioner and claimed to be super smart, and they basically would refuse to allow me to participate in external activities. So we had, for example, a trip to go to New York City to meet like some people and to like dive in and learn all this.
Okay.
None of the other students even really wanted to go. Like it was just a fun, free trip to New York. And I'd like written papers, did self-research. I'm working at a startup company doing all this like analytics on my own. And so I applied for it and went and talked to him and explained like why I wanted to go. And they're like, nope, you can't go.
You can't participate. I'm like, but I have one of the highest grades in the class.
And I've been talking about going to Wall Street for years now. Like, this is a perfect opportunity.
Couldn't go. And so there's just a lot of that kind of like negative, I don't know.
Professors, for example, preach a lot about how they know everything, you know, the industry practitioners, but I think the issue is that they just don't have the skills and the tools in finance anymore to really go where the market's going. And so I think finance as a whole is shifting. So when I graduated, I just felt like I didn't have the tools anymore. Like I interviewed at a few big banks and they like kind of laughed at me like, well, it's great you can use Excel, but like you need to be able to do, you know, statistical analytics, you need to be able to use all these other softwares like Python and R. And so for me, I didn't have the tools. So when I graduated, I thought, I've got to do something, right? I need math and stats and programming tools to kind of leverage myself into these Wall Street roles. And so that's really why I left finance, was that I just felt like they didn't have the rigor I needed to really explore kind of the options I wanted to do.
And so you were talking about your startup, and I'm curious as to like how your experience with that was.
Okay, so I'll give you some rundown on it. People ask, I don't talk about it a lot, but so my father started a division at another corporation that specialized in concrete products. And so he created a new product where they built entire structures that were like restrooms that would go in like national forests, public parks, storage facilities, things like that. But the entire thing is precast. So essentially it's like it's bomb proof. It's like it can't get blown over. You can't burn it down. It's like this invincible building. And he built that up when I was a kid and ran an entire division there, and then ended up leaving in 2006, which was like my junior year of high school, maybe 2005, 2006. And he's like, I'm going to start my own firm.
Right. I already started and built this entire basically division and company inside of another company. Why not just go build my own? So he went out and found, I think it was like 9 other investors at the time. We added 2 other investors later on. And we just did a startup. And I started out being like a secretary. It's like, Dimitri, I need papers filed. I need you to call, Washington state taxes and report these numbers. The guys need lunch. Go get lunch. Like I was the bottom of the bucket, kind of like the errand boy. And then as I started going through high school more, they started giving me a little bit more responsibility. And I was always treated those like, so family members, there's 2 ways family members treat you in businesses. You are either like the boss's son, so they treat you amazing, or it's like you're the boss's son, so you have to do all the crappy work because no one else will do it.
Is that a thing? The latter?
Yeah. So I was the latter.
Really?
Yeah.
I always thought it was the first part.
No. It depends. It depends on the family.
Well, because where I'm from, that's always the case. Because the county I live in is Fairfield County, and if you look it up on Wikipedia, I think it used to be like the second wealthiest county in the country, but it's top 10 somewhere. And that's the case. Like, if you walk in any bank around here, it's some kid who goes to the same high school as your kid. It's 100% always that way. Like a kid I went to high school with, his father works for a top 3 or 5 bank in the country, and he ended up getting a position at that firm. And so he obviously got treated amazing, as if he was like a named partner or something. And so that's usually the case. I never really thought it was the latter. That's interesting.
Yeah. So I think part of my dad's theory is that I was young. I didn't know. I didn't have a business degree or anything at the time. Me and my dad are probably the same personality-wise. So we're both kind of hard-headed and like, I know what I'm doing, so like, don't really tell me how to do it differently. And so, and I mean, I understand the perspective, right? I'm a young high school kid.
Like, you're not going to give him the cream of the crop jobs.
So I worked through a lot of it though. Like I started out doing all the manual labor. It's like we were pouring concrete. I'm like shoveling concrete and cutting rebar and building forms and like doing the terrible stuff. And then the guys that were on the same team, they did like the finishing work, which is like you come in with a trowel at the end and you spray it down with some like Yuko bar, which is a smoothing agent. And then you like hand trowel it and you make it look pretty. That's not the crappy part. The crappy part is like dragging 20-foot sticks of rebar across the yard and putting them in a chop saw and then shoveling all this concrete. Like it was not the greatest job, but I did it. And then over time,
so I'm just filling in the company where they need it.
So I kind of transitioned from doing production to business. And then it was like we needed both. So I was working like in summers, 40 hours doing manual labor. And then as soon as like everybody went home at like 3 or 2:30 or 3, then all of a sudden I would just like switch hats and I'm like in the office doing bookkeeping and filing federal taxes, and doing payroll and making sure people are getting paid and like doing the corporate analysis to see how our cash flows are balancing out and talking to vendors and all that. So I kind of segued into this piece of doing the business half and the manufacturing half. And I eventually convinced my dad after many, many arguments that I knew what I was doing.
And a lot of times, like, he had no option. Like, accountants would quit,
or people would refuse to do work for us, and we didn't have the money. So we're like, there's no other option. It's like, your son can do it for free, basically, or like, it just doesn't get done. And so for that, over the years, I gained a lot of experience in doing things that you would never have an intern do. You would never have like an analyst do, but it's like, there was no one else to do it. So I kind of filled those roles. And then towards, I don't know, probably 2-3 years in.
So in the college range, it just became like I was kind of the core piece to the business.
Like we had to do things. So I was building the website because we had no website. I had to build the website. Somebody started it before and it wasn't that great. And then I came in and like rewrote the entire thing. I beat out our competitors. So the company he started originally, they had a crappy website and they started mimicking our website. So I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is like confirmation I'm doing good on the marketing and the website building. And then we started like, for example, marketing wars. You can see the terminology in Google and how much people pay per click. Mm-hmm. And typically it's like, I don't know, 20 cents, 30 cents, maybe $1 a click.
our company name, I created a bidding war between two of our competitors, and they were paying like over $30 a click.
Jesus.
So somebody types in our name, and then they pay for that spot above us. It's $30-something for every click. So I have like this weird background of like, how do you analyze the data? How do you optimize the website? So do like SEO optimization. How do you beat the competitors? I had to do all the corporate accounting and finance. So I was like setting up systems where we would export all of our pricing from QuickBooks, which is like the accounting, into Excel. And then I set it up in Excel so it just automatically price all of our products. So we would just get like, I don't know, say you buy new products for the day and the price changed, it would automatically update all of our pricing.
I just wanted to say, I think it's so interesting that sometimes under the certain environments you're in, you can learn things much quicker, or you can retain things probably less like efficiently. And so basically, like, I think all that experience, I think you had, because it's from what it sounds like, it sounds like you pretty much learn some useful skills out of necessity. And I think that's important because there's some sort of pressure there, because it's kind of like, it needs to get done like now, like right now. It needs to get done now. And then you have to spend the time to actually learn it. And then, like, you know, there's certain deadlines that come up, and you might not be able to learn it in time, let alone like actually get the work done in time, and like things like that. And I think that's important because I think for me personally, I think when you learn things under pressure, one, you learn it faster, and two, you learn it better. Because whenever there's some sort of like emotion involved with what you're learning with, you tend to like remember it just like better. And I think that's important because sometimes if you kind of like just go through the motions and just like learn things, you just might not like retain it as well.
Yeah. And I think part of it too for me was that, so I think in a lot of corporate environments, right, you're kind of underneath of somebody. So your boss always takes like that responsibility for you. For me, it was always like I filed the taxes. And so our president and the board of directors, whatever, had to sign the tax sheet saying it was done correctly. But it's like, if those taxes weren't done right, it was my name on the chopping block. Like, no one's going to say like, oh, we can blame some accounting department, or there's like a politics involved. And so I think it's like what you're saying, right? It's like all that responsibility was on me at 19, 20, 21 years of old. So I had to figure out how to do it. And if not, it's like they're coming after you personally. They're not going to be coming after like your business, basically.
Did anyone offer you a job from like all that work you did? No.
Now, I interviewed at a ton of places. Like, so I worked there, I finished my finance degree, and then I interviewed all these places, and nobody wanted to hire me because there's this weird dynamic where it's like, you just graduated college, but now you have like 6 years of work experience. And I'm like, yeah, like I'll work for like a starting role position. I want to work corporate finance. I'll take any finance job. Nothing. And then when I graduated from my master's degree, I had this big section on my resume because I engineered a derivative product on, how was it? It was on property rights for sales territories. We created a whole licensing systems with all these licensees. And so I created a system where you could price out exclusive rights to sales in a specific state. So it's like a derivative product. Like, how much are you willing to pay for the right to have only the products from that state? So I did all this stuff and I wrote it on a resume. No one would hire you. And so I went back and I thought, like, no one likes this. It seems too out there. Like, what's the odds of a 20-year-old kid, 22-year-old kid who actually like basically helped run this startup, who's done all this stuff? So I just shrunk it down and made like 2 bullets, like did basic analytics at this company and like helped with like accounting and finance. And after I did that, I got a bunch of offers.
I think that's so ridiculous. I don't know what HR people are looking for these days, but it's honestly like it's kind of like laughable at best. Like, I was gonna bring this up, I forgot, and I'm happy you just said that, because I think in finance you run into a lot of what I think today it's called imposter syndrome, where people look very, very good on they look very good on paper, and then you meet them in person and they're either some weirdo who can't put 2 sentences together, or there's some person who can't really like talk about like, you know, what happened in the markets like on Friday, even though like you have like, you know, literally like Robinhood you can just like have on your phone, or TD Ameritrade, or like any of the like 100 other sources that you can use. Like, I don't know, like what like it's kind of unfortunate because like everyone knows what they're looking for. Like you look on a page, and then if you see Wharton, like you're not looking down at the rest of the page, because as long as you see Wharton and then 3.7 next to it, then like they get the interview.
So one of the biggest issues I have, and I don't know if it's a generational thing, I don't know if
I think it's part of social media, part of the internet. And one of the struggles of my channel, like I want to sit and teach people really good skills. But the issue I think is that so many people nowadays want like that super quick and easy like project. Like, Dimitri, tell me how to be a statistician in like 5 hours. Tell me how to take a Udemy course in like 20 minutes.
Learn Python in 2 weeks.
Yeah. So you get these resumes, and I think that's the issue, is these kids have taken 1 or 2 courses, and a lot of times it's an online course. It's not very well done.
Like Udemy.
And then they check it off and they say like, oh, I'm a statistician, I'm a programmer, I'm a quant. And I think it's a generational thing now where it's like everybody wants to do something super quick. And a lot of them want to go from like an analyst to a director within like 2 years because they think they're just so smart. And I think it's that issue is like they haven't had to learn things at a deep enough level to really appreciate like being an expert in that field would take you years. It could take, like, for example, with me, quantitative finance. It's a lifetime goal for me. Like, I'm not ever going to get to a point where I'm like, you know what? I've learned enough. I think I'm just going to just stop reading books and stop learning and like just sit back and cruise. But I think that's part of the issue. And then it makes it challenging for HR because HR is always an expert at HR issues, but they have no idea what we do in every department. So when they're hiring accountants and like finance people and quants and like, software engineers. And so IT falls back on this really terrible practice where it's like, the hiring manager gave me these 10 skills. I have a whole stack of resumes and I want to see these resumes have to match exactly these 10 skills. If it doesn't match, then they just throw them out. And that was the secret for me, was writing the resume that had all the skills from the job posting on my resume. So it was easy for HR to look at it and go, yep, he's done regression. He's done, time series. He's done, stochastic calculus, and he can program in 5 languages. And if you don't make it that easy for HR, half the time you just get tossed.
And it's really unfortunate, but it's like, I kind of understand it because it's so hard to sort through like 1,000 resumes.
One thing I learned, and something that I do, is I don't have a traditional like black and white resume that's in like a Word doc. I actually use something called Nova Resume. How much have you heard of it?
I've never heard of it.
It's more of like it's a resume template. And instead of like putting work experience, and it's kind of like there's 3 bullet points and it's all one line across the page. Let's say the page is kind of split in half. And those 3 bullet points are run to maybe half of the page, and basically you have 2 columns, and there's just like more space on it. But like the background, like only like the top part, like the color's a little bit different, and it's just something different that kind of makes you take like a second look at it. And at first I was like, this is pretty risky, but at the same time I had nothing to lose at the time I was doing it, and I still kind of use it because everyone, even during my interviews, because last year I interviewed for Goldman Sachs for the first time. It was interesting. They cold called me because I did their engineering essentials program. And so I'm kind of like in their database per se. And so when they reached out to me, they asked me if I wanted to interview for an tech internal audit position, which is like a new role kind of thing. And then I was like, you know what? Like, I'm kind of looking for like a business experience because I haven't had that yet until like I had it this summer. And so like, I'll pass. And I was like, you know what? It's Goldman Sachs. Like, if I get it, then like I can always like switch to like another position. So why not? And then I did it, but I didn't end up getting it, even though they asked me to interview for it. And then I interviewed for sales and trading. And so that didn't really go that well because obviously since I didn't have a strong financial foundation, and I thought I also was in that boat last year, I kind of like, basically, I think when people think that you can like get to a certain place in like 2 years, that's completely unrealistic. I think part of that is like not also like experiencing enough like humility, because you have to understand like what's realistic and what's not, and you can't really understand that if you don't understand why. And the only reason to understand why is to kind of learn it the hard way, like I did. And I've learned so many things the hard way. Like have you ever heard of a company? You might know. I think it's on Wall Street. It's called New York International Capital.
It kind of sounds familiar, yeah.
I think they're in a small investment banking firm, and I know nothing about investment banking, but I somehow got the interview. So I was like, you know what? I'll just go on like the Wall Street like Mojo. Is it the Wall Street Mojo? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go on the Wall Street Mojo, just look up a bunch of investment banking questions, and I'm gonna just pray to God they take a gamble on me and I get those questions right, and I'll get the interview. And so it was the weirdest interview I've ever had. It's like the setup was exactly like this. I had a computer and the guy was on the other side of the screen, but he didn't show his face, so I guess he was in bad mood or something, or he just like wasn't having a good hair day or something. But
He wasn't
I get
wearing
on. Yeah, exactly. But I get on, and not even 2 seconds in, he goes, "Okay, you're here. Let's get started. What's the difference between debt and equity?" And I was like, "Jesus, hello, how are you doing?" But then he caught me on a question that was kind of technical. It was an accounting question. I didn't take accounting at the time because I'm taking it now, obviously. But he asked me a question that you could only really know if you understand like the relationship between all the like the financial statements. And then he was like, "So are you a business major? Have you ever taken any courses?" I was like, "No, not yet. Like everything I know is pretty much like self-taught, blah blah blah." And then he was like, "All right." And he asked me a few more questions, and he was like, "All right, why don't we stop the interview now? And then why don't you apply back again when you know a little bit more about finance?" And I was like, "Fuck that." But that was pretty rough, but then again, I knew what I was getting myself into because I thought I could kind of shortcut the process and just kind of get lucky. But I needed that because then again, like I said, you need to like experience that like firsthand, or you're gonna have this really like unrealistic like expectation of you moving up very quickly, and then once it doesn't happen, it's gonna hit you very hard. So like the earlier the better, I say, to be honest.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest questions I would like to ask people when you interview is like, what's the biggest struggle you've had? And most people don't have anything good. It's like they've skated through, their parents are wealthy, they went to a good school, like life hasn't been hard. And it's like, I think that's part of what makes people successful is I want that character piece. Like I want the drive, the determination. And I think for me, like going through somewhat of a terrible master's degree and really struggling and then finding my position in there, like that's what's like made me, like if I can keep going through that and I'm dedicated to finish all that, it's like at work, it's not that big of an issue. And like even in work, like I started out, people wanted you to give opinions and I'd give opinions and no one liked them. And they argue. So when they argue with you, right, most analysts and people that just start out are like, oh, okay, like you're the boss, you're the senior model or whatever. I'm just gonna like, that you must be right. I would go, again, I got this textbook, I'm going in like, that's not correct. You guys didn't do any of this right.
Hey man, it says it right here.
Yeah, it's right on page 275. And so like, they're arguing with you, but it's like, I think that's what's made me, for example, my specialties in time series. The reason I'm so good at it is everybody has fought me the entire way. Like people with PhDs, people have been doing it for 20 years. I'm always wrong. They always tell me I'm wrong. But it's like I spend so much time, like I don't want to be wrong. I want to improve the models. I want to help the bank. And I want to educate people, right? Like if you don't know it, let's figure out how to do it. But I've had like the toughest questions and people like muddle the problems and like spin it all around so you're confused. But I've had to struggle so much on going through all the textbooks and then the textbook doesn't make sense. And then I'm downloading the original academic paper, you know, from like Dickie Fuller and trying to figure out exactly how it works. And it's like, and that doesn't work. And then it's like, then you're going to another textbook and then you're purchasing, like you, right? I'm purchasing 3 more textbooks to figure this out. And I think that struggle and really trying to get all the exact details correct, that's what you want in an employee. Like that's what makes you successful in a career is having to do that struggle and really knowing all the ins and outs and how people might view it that'll be wrong, but also like how you can explain it to them. So it's like, oh, okay, it makes complete sense.
I've given Pearson, and I'm talking about the company, not a person. I've given Pearson so much money. At this point, I should be like at the board meetings at this point. Like I've spent so much money on them. It's crazy. Like I need Class B shares. I need my voting shares. I need 10% of that because at this point I've done so. I guarantee you. Yeah, exactly. Half of the books in my room are probably from Pearson. And I'm not gonna lie, the books are pretty good. So like, whatever.
Yeah, it's worth the value of what you paid, but still, like a big thank you or like a free book or something would be nice. Is like, hey, thanks for buying all these books.
Yeah, exactly. It's just whatever. But I was gonna ask you. So, do you interview people, Dimitri?
I do.
So, how long have you been doing that?
Since my first job at working in a banking. So
No way.
we started my first job's kind of an interesting one. The bank was doing CCAR, and CCAR started in 2010. I didn't start working until 2014. But when they did CCAR, a lot of these banks, when it just came out, they didn't even know what to expect. So most of these banks had no quants. It's just finance teams. And I remember talking to the guy that was responsible for this for the first few years, and he's like, the Fed came in and they were asking me questions about, like, did it meet this assumption? And did you guys like create like a Brush-Pagan test? And what were the results of this? And he's like, I don't know what to tell him. He goes, I don't know what the test is. I don't know what the data is. We made a model in Excel and it worked. And so for my first job, they created an implementation team. So it's not technically supposed to be quanti, but it's like you're taking all the models and you execute and run them and look at results and do that. And so my boss just took that role and they hired me. I was the first employee. So I basically had to create with her all the documentation, all the processes, all the procedures. And then we interviewed another guy to come on. And I don't remember if I interviewed him. He might have got hired beforehand. But when we started hiring other people, they just gave us a stack of resumes and said, hey, go through these and pick people out. So it was like, you're just responsible for picking people. Like, I don't know.
Have you ever given someone a hard time? Because like I'm actually interested in like, I've actually had a conversation with like a really good friend of mine on this. Like, I'm wondering like, what happens during like your day-to-day work? Like, let's say you have a tough day and then you have to do an interview with someone. If you're in a bad mood, are you gonna kind of like, I don't want to be in a spot here, but like let's say hypothetically a interviewer had a bad day and they go into an interview and they're not too much of a good mood. Do you think for the most part, if that person is upset, they're gonna ask some probably tougher questions?
So in general, no. The reason being, well, this depends on everybody because everybody interviews differently. So it's like
different, yeah.
Yeah, when I got thrown in, like nobody trained me and said, Dimitri, this is how you interview someone. But most of the people that I've worked with, they prepare things like a week in advance. So like I've had people, I knew we had like 2 interviews coming in at a different firm, and I already had their resumes in my hand at least a week in advance. And I already had the job posting and I knew what we were hiring for. So I already created all the questions a week in advance and put everything together. And I asked different questions typically to different people. So you're not going to get the same interview as someone else. And the reason I do this is because everybody's resume is different. And I want to make sure that you can highlight what you're good at.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do with me is put on your resume you're a time series expert. Because when you come into the interview, if your resume is half time series, I'm going to ask you almost all time series questions. If your resume was like almost all data science, which I've had, data scientists come in, I'm just going to ask you data science questions. Like, why would I expect you to know a different field? And so I think it depends. Some interviewers do it on the fly. And if you do it on the fly, I think your attitude can definitely impact the interview. So if you're having a bad day, I don't know, you found out you're not gonna get promoted or something bad happens, someone yells at you in another room, and then like you get pulled into an office to be told that you're not to talk to people like that. Then it kind of ruins your day and it can have a negative impact on the interview. But I think the way that banks and companies in general should be doing it is stop all these dumb brain teaser questions. I hate them. I hate them so much. And actually just ask, like, I like to have, like, this would be like an example of an interview. Like I would sit you down and ask about your education and where you came from and try to get to know you personally and then ask about what's on the resume. And I think if more people did that, you would find out that some people might not be a perfect fit for the job, but that they have other characteristics that would make them a better hire because they could learn other pieces of it as they go.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting because I had a conversation with someone, and it's one of my good friends that just entered at JP Morgan, but we just finished some of our interviews for this upcoming summer, and I was interested because I had a good interview, and I was like, you know what? I feel like some of the interviewers, like for the most part, it's on you. Like, if they ask you a tough question, then you're gonna have to be creative and think of something clever to say. But for the most part, sometimes I'm gonna put a number in. I'm gonna say 25%. It's like the weighting on it. The questions that interviewers ask you can really make or break you. Because if they're asking you questions that, like, yeah, maybe you had something good to say about it, but it was just words that were good. It wasn't really words that kind of like showed like you like had some vibrancy to it, like showed like what you're made of, like what you're capable, and like things like that. Like if they ask you, like if they ask you like a cool prod, like no, not even that. Like if they asked you like, tell me what would you do if a client wanted to do something unethical. Well, it's like, okay, like I came up with something like some very like PR kind of like good like response to say, but like that response like doesn't like really tell you like about me and like what I can do, like what I can show you.
Yeah, and I think part of it too. So most people ask us, Dimitri, how do you interview for a quant position? And it's like it depends, because a lot of people get those stupid books which you can buy online for like trading interviews are the worst. They all get the same dumb book and they just randomly pick questions out of it. So if you prepped in that book and you've memorized all the questions, you'll pass most of the interviews.
Solid. Okay.
It's like, it doesn't mean you're smart. It doesn't mean you even know the information or how to solve it, but it's like you've seen the same problem over and over. So you just memorized it. Like memorization is not a good skill to have, I don't feel like. Like you want to be smart. Like you can solve new problems. So I hate when they have those types of interviews. It just drives me nuts. And I'm with you. Like I think they ask too many questions that are like, you already know the right answer. Like, should you do something unethical? Let's see if you're really going to do it. It's like, of course you're not going to answer like, yeah, I'd screw him over. And
is the SEC going to sue him for insider trading? We need to know, even though he's working in like the accounting department or like something.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I just think they're dumb questions. I think a lot of people don't know how to interview well. And I think it's just a terrible, like when I had a recruiter call me in the last few days and they were asking about it. And I'm just like, you're asking me dumb questions. And one of the biggest tech firms interviewed me to be a data science manager. And they asked me to, what was it? Have you ever used, like significance testing? And I was like, just taken away, like, A, this is a senior manager role to run a team. And B, like, how would you build any model without doing p-value tests? And I asked them, and then the HR person didn't know what to say. They're like, so have you done it? And I'm like, yeah, of course I've done this. I've done this a lot. Like, I'm just getting frustrated. Dumb questions.
You know what a p-value test is? Yeah, I've heard of it, but I'm not an expert. I can get back to you, to my manager. I'd be happy to talk to her for you. That's so funny. She didn't even know. She's like, yeah, I think, yeah, that makes sense. Did you do it, Dimitri? Are you sure?
It just drives me nuts when they ask these questions. I'm like, are you really hiring, or are you just trying to like sort?
That is too funny. But it reminds me of my interview that I got for PNC, and one of the main reasons why I got it, well, for one, the person who gave it to me is a very like well-known person who I didn't know until I actually started working there, and I was like, Jesus, like no wonder like I kind of like got a good word in, because he is part of something called the OCIO group, Outsourced Chief Investment Officer group, and it's basically a group of like the top investment advisors, basically pretty much in the firm, and he was part of that, and I was like, Jesus, I didn't know he was that high up. But I'm really good with him now. But basically, he was my first interviewer, because the way it did it, it's so dumb how they do super days nowadays. But basically, it was like school. Like I was there from 8 to 2:50. Okay, and then I had one interview. I was first up. I had one from 8 to 8:30 with 2 people, and then my next one wasn't until 2, which makes 0 sense because I want to go and enjoy Pittsburgh, because they flew me down to Pittsburgh, and I want to maybe see the Pirates play. Yeah, that's okay, because I'm big on baseball. But that didn't happen because I guess they thought it was a good idea to push my interview like 5-6 hours later than my first one, which didn't really make so much sense. But like it happened, it's whatever. I got the job, so I'm not complaining. But during the actual interview themselves, so I think I do a pretty good job of like prepping for interviews, because like one of the first things I'll do is, especially if it's a well-known company, because PNC is the 9th biggest bank in the country, so I figured they're pretty well known. So I'll type in like the position, and then I'll go. Can't believe I'm forgetting the website. But basically, there's a website that usually gives you salaries and like jobs, positions and stuff, but they also have some interview questions in there too.
The Glassdoor.
Thank you, Glassdoor. Yeah. Glassdoor. Yeah. So I'll go there and I'll go in Glassdoor and I'll write, like, I use printer paper. I don't use like notebooks because like if I ever want to edit something, I can't go back on like a page of a notebook if like I already have another topic on like the next page. So I use printer paper. People think like they don't like that, but that's what I do. So I printer paper and I write down every single question, and I probably had like at least like realistically probably like 50, 60 questions, both behavioral and technical, even though they don't really ask technical questions at big banks unless like the position itself is technical, like being a quant or doing sales and trading like me. Because it was crazy. Actually, to switch to technical real quick, when I was interviewing for Goldman for sales and trading, and I don't want to give out too much. Actually, no, I am. One of the questions they asked me was, so what is your math background, and do you know something called principal component analysis? And I was like, what the fuck is that? I was like, no, of course I don't know what that is, but I was like, like I may have heard of it, but would you be able to tell me more about it? And of course, I'm completely BSing it. Like I've never heard of it in my life, but I just don't want to seem complete and like uninformed. But then he just told me that basically it's a way to change dimensionality, like dimensionality of reduced dimensionality, basically what it was. I was like, okay, that's great. But yeah, like I was like, Jesus, like those questions can get very technical because he was basically saying that not only do you have to have like some like, I'm not sure if you heard of it, you might have, but you have to have a
PCA is like the only math thing that the business students do. And so
really?
every time I run into a finance student, they always go, oh, do you guys use PCA? Like when I start mentioning modeling, they always ask that. I'm just like, no, I don't use PCA. I mean, you could use it, but I mean, it's just like one out of like 1,000 tools.
So when you value equities, do you use like DCF to calculate their future cash flows? It's kind of it's kind of one of those questions. It's interesting, but yeah, I like those are the only questions that I've personally gotten like for a technical position. Like technical position, I got a technical question, but for this role, they only asked me like very behavioral questions, and that's a problem with some of these like bigger sites like banks. They really ask you like I'm gonna call them pre-made like questions. They are pre-made. I mean like they even had the piece of paper with the questions on them in front of me. I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
But they asked me, what are your 3 greatest strengths? And I was like, bingo. And the reason why I said bingo is because it was word for word the same exact question on Glassdoor. And of course, like if you get asked that like on the fly, you're gonna get caught off guard. You're like, let me think about that. Like 3 good words, but I took the time to think about it already, so I was like, boom, done. I already have it.
It's so hard. It is so hard. That's the thing I think that drives me nuts is like people don't prep really well for interviews, and it's trying to ask yourself all those questions before the interview.
Yeah, it's really having a conversation with yourself. And I think I'm so just to give you a little background, the reason why, like, I'm not sure if I got into like the time period I taught myself programming, but I was able to teach myself programming to a good extent where I could do that project to get into Capital One's program. I taught myself Python in about a month. And if you're wondering how that's possible, I woke up at 6 a.m. every morning. And this is not an exaggeration. And by 6, I really mean like 2 or 3 days a week. I woke up at like 8, but like I'm gonna say 6 just because like a lot of people are listening. To 6, I woke up at 6, and then I would realistically, not exaggerating, I would eat at 12, but I'm eating while I'm working, and I would go upstairs in like, I'm gonna call it a little loft. I would lock myself in there. Realistically, I'm teaching myself programming for like 11 or 12 hours a week because like I figured like recruiting season's coming up and I don't want to miss out on it. And I have nothing to lose because I've never had any experience. And I'm prescribed to Adderall, so I can concentrate for very long periods of time without kind of spacing out. And so that's how I kind of got away with it. But basically, well, fuck, I lost my train of thought again. What was I saying before that? I hate when that happens.
Talking about the amount of education and training for interviews, like prepping for it.
Yes. Okay. So basically, for at least when I did PNC, it's really, at least for me, it was all about just having, like I said, like a conversation with myself, but also writing down those responses. Because at least when you write them down, like you remember things that you write down better. So I always write that down. I mean, it killed my hand doing it because like it was like 60 questions, and I'm a big three principal kind of guy. So I'll usually try to have three responses for each answer. So I think it's like a McKinsey trick, like the consulting company. That's why they like do everything in threes. But I try to have three reasons for each answer I have, and whether it's like a stock pitch or whether it's like, tell me about yourself, walk me through your resume.
Yeah.
It's so funny. People have like a lot of people have trouble with that question, walking through your resume. But if you have like a very different like experience, like I guess like you and I have, it's actually like the best kind of question you can get, because like you can start anywhere and you can end anywhere. Like I always talk about how I started off my career as a software engineer, then I went into fintech, and then I realized I didn't like it. I did a couple programs. If it's Goldman Sachs, at least what I did, I told them I did some of their programs, and then I wanted to get more into business, and I switched into that. But then I added a few things into there.
See, but you understand the question, because most people think the question is read me your resume.
Now that's a huge problem, because for one, I mean, like at least in business, you start to realize quickly people don't want you to read, especially when you're doing PowerPoints. They don't want you to read off things they can see, because it's like for them, it's a little insulting in a sense, because they don't want to say it outright, but it's kind of like insulting them, because it's kind of like you're reading me something like I see, like what are you trying to do, even though it's like not like ill-intentioned or ill-founded.
Yeah.
It's
but
really
I mean,
like trying to be creative with what you're trying to say, like put a twist on it, basically.
Yeah, but I mean the whole point of like walk me through your resume or tell me a little bit about yourself is like I want to know from you, like, why are you a great candidate? Like, what is your story? And I think that's what people don't realize is nobody views themselves, at least not in the way I look at it. I'm a story. I'm the character. I'm the main character of my own story. And people want to know like why, like you're talking about, right? How did you start? Where did you go? Why did you change jobs? How did you end up over here? Like, why didn't you like that? That's what they're looking for. And I think so many people just take it as like, here, you were too lazy to read the resume, so let me read it for you. And it's like, I went to these schools. I worked at these jobs.
I don't even talk about what school I go to, honestly, when I answer that question, because they see it right there. Like, I'm not going to say it. Like, sometimes, like, it'll kind of slip out. Like, as you may know, I'm a student at the university, et cetera, et cetera. And it kind of slips out. Like, it didn't mean to say it. Like, oh, fuck, I already said it. So, like, then, like, I'll just go back and, like, just start from where I actually was going to start and then just go.
I always mention my school.
Really?
Even now, like I'm already years into my career, I'm like, I went to Michigan, and we were the best. We were the second best economics program in the country.
So you might as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
even my colleagues will laugh because I always tell them, Michigan's the best. It's the best school. It's better than everything else. And then they'll argue with me. They'll go, well, your football team wasn't that great this year. And then we have that debate between each other for a while.
Were you involved a lot on campus? Like, did you do like a lot of club sports, like extracurricular activities? Were you involved a lot on campus? Like, did you do like a lot of club sports, like extracurricular activities?
No, I mean, even in undergrad, I didn't go to a lot of sporting events.
I didn't.
But like looking back,
I played basketball.
I wish I would have went to more.
Really?
I wish I would have been more involved. It's hard when you're actually at school to study, because there's people that go to school to really study, and there's people that just go to school to have fun. And I don't drink, so it's like I don't go to any parties. So that knocks out everything off the bat for me. And then it's like I kind of go to sporting events here and there if I have time. But I was always so poor, like I didn't have money to pay for football tickets or season tickets or basketball tickets or whatever. And then like graduate school, you're studying so many hours, and it's like you're depressed and you're tired. And by the time you get like on a weekend, it's like I'm gonna sleep for 6 hours, 8 hours past when I normally sleep because I've got to get up and do it all over again on Sunday.
I think the problem with colleges now is exactly what you said, but you start to realize that, I guess I'll categorize it different, but there are people who know have their stuff together, for lack of a better term, and there's the people who don't have their stuff together. So people who really don't care, and that's a huge, and people who have their stuff together, sometimes they're not exactly like as like put together as like you may think. So I guess like where I'm going with it basically is that it can be a huge distraction because some people's goals and expectations are much lower than like what yours might be. It's like if you want to work at Goldman Sachs and like JP Morgan and all that stuff, like if you go to like, unless you go to like University of Virginia or University of Michigan, it's like if you go to University of Connecticut or something, like it's a whole different like ballgame. Like people are not Like people are not like they don't have that like same ambition, and that can be like very distracting if that's like what like your ego is, and like especially when you get to business. I mean, at least from the people I've met, that's usually like the goal. But like when you go to like a state school or like a very like big population of like people your age, like it's not really like the same thing, and it kind of can be like a wedge down in a sense, like to you like mentally. It's like, do I really like, you start to question yourself in a sense, like am I shooting for the stars here, or is this like realistic?
Yeah, and I think, not to go too far in education, I think the problem now, those universities are so driven to make money.
Yeah, 100%.
They let everybody in. So it's like when you start looking at schools. So one of my colleagues, his son was going to college, and I told him, do not apply to these schools. Like, I know you keep telling it, do not apply, do not go here. And he's like, why? And I'm like, all right, let's Google this. You start looking at like acceptance rates and graduation rates. Mm-hmm. The lower the acceptance rate, the higher the graduation rate.
And there's a direct correlation to that, or is it just
direct correlation?
Okay.
You can look at all the schools, you can plot it out. Okay. The reason being is that schools that have a really small acceptance rate means that they're a high quality school. So lots of people are applying to it. They all want to go there, but they're super selective on who they allow and don't allow. So they can pick off just the cream of the crop. Like it's the top 5% of the best people in the United States, for example. And since they're such good people and they're so dedicated and have great GPAs and, you know, good backgrounds, and they're driven and motivated, the chance they graduate is super high. It's like 90-something%. You look at other schools at really, really low or really high acceptance rates, they let everybody in as like a money-making machine.
Yeah, exactly.
The graduation rates are super low. And I think that's one of the issues now is like school, everyone keeps saying you need a college degree, you need a college degree. It's like, you don't need a college degree for a lot of jobs. And I think it's like what you're saying too, you get stuck in these bubbles where it's like, I want to work in banking, I want to work on Wall Street, I want to do this. And so the only people you see are the people around you doing something similar.
Sometimes they don't exist.
Yeah, I say sometimes they don't exist. And then you forget though that there's the entire rest of the world.
Yeah.
Like, who do you think's building up freeways for you so you can drive your car places? And who's maintaining your car? And who does electricity to get it to your house? And like, there's who cuts your hair, for example, and who does your taxes? There's all these jobs out there, and I think a lot of them you don't need a college degree for. And so many people are wasting time going to college. And it's like, great, you got an English degree. Like, what are you going to do with that? Like, you can't do anything with an English degree, and being a teacher doesn't pay well.
I found that point about graduation rate interesting, because like to offer a different perspective, because when you're referring to graduation rate, the face value of it, it's kind of like, okay, like the graduation rate is pretty much affected by people who drop out. But do you think that would also nowadays have to do with maybe the debt burden, I guess, more than it has to do maybe the difficulty of the academia?
No, and the reason being is that the U.S. government just hands money out like candy.
Literally, yeah.
And like it's amazing. And people, this is the thing I think it's amazing. Students complain they have the debt, and like, why would I didn't know that I had to pay it back? I'm like, did you not read the document that they gave you at the beginning of the loan specifying the terms and conditions of that loan?
Now they just need the money at that point. No one's gonna read the loan.
They just think it's free money, and I just like, I don't know. I'm a huge proponent against a lot of people going to college, and people think that's bad. But I think a lot of those people end up in miserable careers because they can't find what they like to do. But everybody keeps telling you, like, you have to get the college degree, you have to do this, you have to do that. And I think a lot of them, if they could explore more and figure out different career opportunities that are available to them, they would be far happier. And like, I have one of my best friends, probably the best example. He dropped out of high school, didn't like going to high school, didn't like school. Everyone's pressuring him, you need to start, you need to finish, right? You should go on to college. And I'm just like, the guy can't finish high school. He's not college material. And so he went on and he got married and he has kids, and he went on to become, basically he was an electrician for a while. He's like an HVAC specialist now. He is so happy, and he makes enough money to do everything he wants to do. And like, his dream life is to ride motorcycles and ATVs and go mudding in cars and like to be outdoors and just do what he wants to do. And his wife fits his personality, but she's like the responsible one that like reins in spending and everything.
Keeps him in check.
Yeah. And it's like, and he's always wanted a family, and like he's super happy, like perfect. I told him how much money I was making on my first job, and he's like, couldn't believe how much they paid me. And he goes, yeah, you know, I could never do it though. I go, what do you mean? He goes, sitting at a desk for 8 hours, I'd kill myself. And I'm like, I mean, that makes sense, right? For me, what makes me happy is sitting at a desk, doing math, solving problems, helping people. And yet what makes him happy is like being outside, working with people, fixing machines, feeling like you have an actual contribution every day. And I think that's where people miss it, is like you can be happy and meet your own goals. And I think a lot of the political perspectives, not to get too far into it, but a lot of the political people think everybody wants the American dream of, they want a house, they want a college education, they want to make six figures. And I don't think it's true for most people. It's like, do you want to make six figures? Of course, everybody wants to make more money, but are you willing to do what it takes to get there? And I think a lot of people are like, well, no, I'd rather, do X, Y, and Z, or I'd rather go on vacation or
play poker.
Yeah, exactly.
Online poker, DraftKings.
And like for me, I don't take very many vacations. I got married and I went to Hawaii when I was 20, on my 20th birthday. And then every big trip between then and 10 years was only for family.
Wait a minute, you got married when you were 20?
Yeah.
There you go. You have to probably be the youngest person I've met married, like youngest person married.
Yeah, I can see that. But it's like with someone who would die. So I would have to fly back for a funeral. Or it's like we'd go for Christmas. I'd go for, 3 or 4 days, maybe a week at most for Christmas. I'd be back. I didn't take an actual vacation for 10 years. So I'd been married for 10 years before my wife and I just took like an actual fun vacation. And people always ask me like, oh, you're just lazy or like you're just cheap or whatever. It's like, well, partially I'm cheap. But at the same time, like my goals is like career. Like I feel like I can't leave work. So I never take all of my PTO every year. I'm always working, trying to get ahead. Because for me, what makes me happy is like that career piece. And it's the excitement of like working in the corporate politics and then, learning more education and helping banks and working with teammates and educating and training people. But again, right, this would be like the most miserable life for my friend. He would hate it. He would never be able to do it. And I think most people would look at me and go like, it's great you make a lot of money and I want your job. But it's like you're not really willing to make the sacrifices that it takes to kind of get to where people are.
But see, I have two things. One, I think it's inherent. It's pretty much like an 80-20 rule kind of like thing. Like it's almost like a cardinal rule in life, in my opinion, that if you want to be rewarded or to have a high return or something, then you need to take on more risk. And I think especially people my age think that you can get away, you can't have it both ways. You can't be have put in very low amount of time and expect higher amount of result. It just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. And the other thing is that for the desk job thing, that's actually the reason why I started off in software engineering. Because I was like, if I'm going to sit at a desk all day, I don't want to be using Excel and crunching numbers. And then once you sort of realize that, only analysts do that. And then once you start being associate and then moving up, it's kind of less than that. And then you start just transitioning more of a managerial kind of role at some point. But I was like, okay, if I'm going to do that, then I might as well be a software engineer, create some cool stuff. And then I realized wow, I really don't like this at all. And it's actually not interesting at all. And it's a lot worse than I thought it would be, which is why I switched back to finance. But the people who are saying that I don't want to sit at a desk for 8 hours, if you sit at a desk, if you consider your home for 8 hours, but not sit at a desk, what's the difference? There's virtually no difference. Except the only thing is it's more interesting and there's more deadlines and stuff. I get there's the work and stuff, but I don't know. I'm just not buying, because if you're gonna do something, it's got to be interesting. The work is interesting. It's just the deadlines and it's all the other stuff, the politics that play into it, the managers, etc.
Yeah, but imagine this though. There's so many jobs where you don't sit. I don't think a lot of people realize that, right? So one of my dreams, if I retire, I'd love to be a farmer. Yeah, I wouldn't be sitting. That's the thing. I would never be sitting. My buddy that does HVAC, he doesn't sit very often. They get in their car and they drive to some customer and they're on their feet, moving around, adjusting parts, running lines, doing a Freon, putting it in the system. And then as soon as you're done, you pack all your stuff up, you get in your car, you probably drive and go to lunch. And then when you're done with lunch, you get back out of your car and you drive again. When I worked at the startup company, I was working 8 hours of construction. You're on your feet for 8 hours. But it's nice to be outside and to I don't know.
That is true. That's right.
Yeah, it's nice doing things. And there are some awesome jobs where you can kind of travel and see people and be outside. I don't know, working for like national parks. It's one of our customers. These people literally just drive their trucks through the forest, get out, walk around, check maintenance, check locks, make sure everyone's like healthy and fine. And they spend like their entire careers in a forest. It's like nice, it's peaceful, it's quiet. But then for some other people, right, like from the East Coast, a lot of people are like terrified of being in like a super huge 1,000-acre forest where it's dead silent and you could be eaten by a bear or a cougar at any minute. But at the same time, right, it's I think the piece that people miss is that there's so many different people with different expectations, and depending where you grow up, your perspective is very, very different from everybody else.
100%. That's so true. And I think well, I guess I'm technically, you call me East Boy, but I think so I lived in Florida, not Florida. I lived in Connecticut the majority of my life, but I also lived in Florida. And like, yeah, Florida's East Coast, but the Northeast, I'm gonna call Northeast their own thing, but the Northeast is drastically different from pretty much every part of the country.
Yep.
It's just very, very different. Like the cultures are very, I don't know how to describe it, but the best way I would describe it is just like, by naming towns, like Greenwich, like Port Chester, Boston, like it's that kind of vibe. And like Florida, like it's just drastically, like, it's different.
It's very different.
Yeah, 100%.
Even like when you start looking, so you can do East Coast, West Coast, and then right, you start breaking it down further. You're like, well, Northeast is different than like the Southeast. And then Florida is kind of its own thing because it's just hanging out in the middle of the ocean. So there's lots of like retirees and other cities
moving there.
Yep. And then Texas is it's basically its own country. Everything in Texas is just so different.
I've never been to Texas yet. I have some friends that go to school in Texas. I need to go visit them, but I want to go to Texas. I swear to God, everyone nowadays wants to move to Texas or Florida. I mean, I would say a quarter of the people, mainly because of the income tax. There's no income taxes,
yeah.
So that's probably why.
Yeah.
But the housing is also nice, especially Austin. Everyone wants to move to Austin. Like 5 years ago, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. There weren't, like, no one was really focusing in that area, and then I think, actually no, the other way.
It's been booming. So
yeah, it's been booming. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the tech hub of Texas. So a lot of firms are moving here.
Yeah.
I mean, even Joe Rogan, the big podcaster.
He just moved to Texas. Was it Austin he moved?
Yeah, he left California, so I'm done with this. The taxes are ridiculous. The homelessness problem's out of control. Like, California's just going into chaos.
Yeah, so
he left, and now he moved outside of Austin somewhere.
Damn, that's crazy. He gets paid. I saw he gets paid $36 million a year. The highest paid podcaster.
He makes more than that, I think, now, though.
Oh, because of the Spotify
with his new deal. He's switching off of YouTube and going over to, I think, Spotify or whatever, yeah.
Spotify exclusive. So many, like, I could be wrong, but, I mean, I don't think you can, but you can't watch the videos on, like, Spotify. And, like, I don't know, like, the video, like, I feel like you kind of need that. Like, there's more, like, life to, like, what you're saying if you actually, like, see the person.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I watch a show all the time. Like, literally all the time.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like, actually, he wasn't even the reason why I wanted to start this. Did I tell you the reason why, like, I started this whole thing?
No.
So basically, during my internship, originally supposed to be 10 weeks, but then they were like, okay, like we still have plans. I don't know what they were thinking. They thought that we were still gonna be able to go to DC because that's where I was supposed to work in DC. And then a month before, and I'm so happy I didn't buy an apartment yet because you're supposed to do a month before. But I was like, you know what? I have a funny feeling they're gonna change their mind, and I was right. But so I didn't end up buying housing, so I'm happy I didn't. But then, what was I saying? Oh yeah. So I didn't buy housing, and I was like, okay, so I only have 6 weeks for this internship. And so I need to make the best out of it. Because, like, basically they're like, okay, it's not 10 weeks and 6 weeks. And like, you know what, folks? It's all online. Start date's still the same. I was like, okay, cool. So it started. And then I was like, I only have 6 weeks. How do I make the best out of these 6 weeks? And so I was like, okay, I want to talk to as many people as I can. And like, you know, whether it's like analysts or people in senior management, preferably senior management, just because it'd be a cool experience to do. I even got to talk to Bill Demchak for like 6 minutes, which was pretty cool, the CEO. So I was kind of pumped about that. But I was like, if I send them a very generic email, even if I'm an intern, like realistically, like people who work there tell like, no, like you'll make time for interns, but like realistically, if you're busy, like you're not gonna make time for anybody. So especially an intern. So I was like, okay, I need to give them like a reason like to want to talk to me, and so that's how the podcast came in mind. Because I was like, if I have a platform, they'll be more inclined or have like a higher chance to want to talk to me, because like the way I looked at it, it's like brands versus people. And like the example I give all the time is like people will know what McDonald's is. You just need to show the logo on their face. They know McDonald's, but no one knows who the CEO is. I don't even know who the CEO is. I just know they got a new one. That's all I know. But no one knows who the CEO is. Like brands are just more powerful and they just have better recognition to people than they do like the actual person that runs it. So I was like, if I have a platform, then I'll probably have like a better chance of getting them on. And so that's kind of why I started. It's pretty much just for me like to network with people. That's pretty much why I did it.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I use mine somewhat. It's hard to explain to people, like, explain that concept, right? Like, for me, it's a branding opportunity. And people are like, well, yeah, but you're doing all this effort and all this work, and you're not getting paid that much. I'm like, I enjoy doing it, so I mean, I can't complain. And then on the second thing, it's right, I do run into people. I went to a remote office location at one of the companies I worked for, and this girl was like, oh, you're Dimitri Bianco. It's so nice to meet you. And I'm like, confused, like, who are you? Where did you come from? I'm like, oh, no, I'm one of your subscribers. I've been watching your channel for a few years. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I didn't know what to respond, but it's nice to get like that. People throughout your firm and other firms and banks and industry as well start realizing who you are. And I think it does help on kind of the branding aspect.
So without giving too much away, because I don't want to put you in the spot here, but for the firms that you worked with, have you had a lot of episodes of that where people are like, you're Dimitri Bianco? Really?
Not a ton. I mean, the best one was a guy was going for his master's degree in data science. So people think like I'm so anti-data science for some reason because I'm not like, I don't know, a fanboy of data science, but they said, you created these videos and guys at my school knew who you were. And they were telling me to go check out these videos that this guy made. And then I had to tell them I work with you.
Really?
But like most people I work, I don't know, it's weird. The people I reach are always some senior people and like analysts, like in random locations all across the world in the US. But a lot of times, most people have no idea who you are. And the most insulting for me is when a recruiter will reach out to you and they offer you like this really low job. And I'm like, do you even know who I am? Like you can look at LinkedIn and see like my title in my current company. So you know I'm further up than that. And then on top of that, you think you would do the research and just search my name. Like all of my YouTube videos will come up, my LinkedIn, like everything will come up. They don't research anything. It's really sad. Like, oh, you must be a pretty poor recruiter if you can't do the time to look someone up.
Like if you're gonna reach out to someone, like at least like do the due diligence.
Yeah.
That never made any sense to me. But I wanted to ask you, so I didn't watch the video yet. I'm probably going to after this. But I saw that you watched the movie Margin Call. And you made a video on it. And I just wanted to ask you, because I find it so curious, because I went through this phase. I'm not sure how many people go through this phase. Maybe it's just a me phase. But This is when I knew nothing about finance. Like, I probably couldn't even tell you what a stock was. Or I could, but, like, I kind of would have to kind of find the words for, like, 10 minutes. But I'm curious as to how good of a job do you think that movie did at explaining, like, what, like, a correct default swap was, like, a CDO and stuff. Do you think that's accurate? Do you think they were missing some parts of it that could be kind of confusing to someone who maybe was watching that movie for the purpose of trying to take something away?
Okay, so I'll answer this with a few responses. Don't watch my YouTube video on it. A subscriber asked specifically because they wanted to understand the video better. But I've never seen Margin Call, and I absolutely hate all finance movies.
Really? How come?
I have not watched Wolf of Wall Street. I haven't watched Margin Call.
No documentaries either?
I will watch documentaries. So there's some by Backlight Production, which are on YouTube. I love them. They're really good because they're like factual and informational. But all of these dumb movies overhype areas that are like non-existent or never happened. Or like that one sliver, that one person. And so it always makes it cringeworthy to watch. So for like margin call, I made the video. It explains what like margin call is and like defaulting on positions and stuff like that. I try to explain it better. But then like if you look at the comments, everyone's like upset. Like you should have watched the movie, and this isn't really what the movie is about.
How dare you?
This is what Wikipedia told me the supporting plot line is. And I mentioned at the beginning of the video I didn't watch it. Like I'm trying to be honest with them. But I just feel like those movies, they don't do a good job at explaining concepts. So like you're asking, right? Do they do a good job? I didn't see the movie, but I've watched like clips of like Wolf of Wall Street and clips of this movie and clips of that. They're never accurate. They're always like overhype it. And it's like everybody's hanging on edge, and it's like you're gonna go from being like super poor to super rich or super rich to super poor within like 2 seconds of a trade. And it's like, it's just so unrealistic. And I think it's one of the reasons so many people want to go into quantitative finance nowadays is they view these traders as like gods. Like you come in and you make all this money and you're moving things around. It's like, that's not how the industry works anymore.
Maybe 2008.
Yeah. We're in big teams now. Like there's quants on the team, and there's computer scientists on the team, and there's traders. And then it's like you split a lot of the compensation between everyone in the team. And then everyone's like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. These guys are making like $1 million to start a job. And I'm like, no, this isn't how it works. But it's just, I don't know. The movies just bug me because they're so dramatized to make it exciting, which I get. But then it ends up with a lot of people wanting to join it for the wrong reasons, I think.
Oh, wait a second. I just realized something. I asked you if you watch Margin Call, but then I asked you about something that was in a different movie. The Big Short. When I was an idiot. Whatever. It happens. But I think the point is the same. Like, the reason why I brought that up is because the way they explained it, it was like, okay, like, I guess that kind of makes sense, because like the way they explained a credit default swap is basically Dr. Michael Burry had Goldman Sachs made that product for them because he was looking at a few of the bonds that he wanted to short or bet against. Okay, and then the way he explained it, and when they were doing that Jenga pitch or like whatever, I'm not sure it's in that clip when he has like a Jenga thing. Yeah, he's talking about the tranches. Then he's talking about how it's like insurance on the bond. If it goes bust, then you can make 10 or 30 times like blah blah blah. But then like when I looked it up, I was like, wait a second, that doesn't sound exactly how he explained it, because it just sounds like, okay, if I want to bet against something, then I'm pretty much buying insurance. But like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, but like they kind of leave out the part that there are like 3 parties involved, where it kind of sounds like it's more of like a 2-party thing, and that's a big difference. Because that's just an extra factor taken into an account. I was like, okay, well, I guess like, yeah, like I guess I kind of got the gist of it, but it's not like, it didn't explain it well. Like if I'm trying to learn finance, I need to know what it actually is, not just like the gist of it.
Yeah, this is the problem I think with the movies. They have to dumb them down so that the average person can watch it and have like an understanding, but it's never really how it works. And then there's so many facets of it, and it's hard to explain to people. And I think this is why it frustrates me with the movies too, is they make the banks seem like they're super corrupt, and like one person makes some crazy decision and it either makes them or breaks them. They never realize like there's all these regulatory layers you have, even before the
audit, compliance.
And then there's all these parties involved, like you're mentioning, right? There's other people involved in these transactions. There's customers that are asking for these products to be built. And then it's like when anything goes wrong, the banks always take the fall. It's always like, that bank was so corrupt and they screwed over all these people. And I'm like, but that customer contacted them and asked them for that product, and they made that product and they took on the risk, and then it defaulted. And then like in the 2008 thing, then they start blaming like the quants for building the models. And I'm like, well, if you're the manager buying the product, don't you think you should understand the product as well? And did you not ask the quant to look at the math? Like, I don't know. There's just so many loose ends for me. It's like, I can't take the public perspective because it's so negative on banking, and yet banks provide so much value to people, but they don't really understand like customers willingly take on risky positions because they want to get that gain.
Yeah, exactly. And I was kind of confused, like have you seen you said have you watched any finance? Did you say that? So you haven't. Okay. Well, there's a scene in The Big Short where they have this Asian American quantitative analyst, and they're like, are you sure of the math? And then he goes, you see this guy? That's my quant. And they're like, what? He's like, my quantitative, my math specialist. He's like, let me he's like let me give you a hint. His name is Yang. He won a math competition in China, and he doesn't even speak English. And then like as a funny scene, they had that guy he's talking about turn around and he goes, "Hey, my name is Jung. I actually do speak English. He just doesn't like to say that I do, just because it makes me seem more authentic." And I'm like, I don't know if I would consider like a maths like special. Like that's not like their purpose. Like correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not really their purpose, is it?
Most of them are. So the stereotype is right. Most of them
is it okay?
And most of them are Chinese. No joke. So this is the weird part most people don't get. The industry is like 90+% international.
Really?
Yep.
I did not know that. Okay.
I'm a rarity. Like the fact that I even work in the industry as an American is just like shocking. And then the fact that I have an entire channel that talks about it's like even more like crazy out there because like, so my master's degree program for financial engineering I started in was 52 students, 2 were American and 50 were international.
Jesus.
Out of that 52, 34 were Chinese. And this is pretty common among programs. Like you have a large group of Chinese, a smaller but still fairly large group of Indians, and then you have an eclectic mix of like, I don't know, Brazil, Italy, France, and just other random places. So the stereotype is somewhat true. And I think one of the reasons Americans don't do it is it's too much math.
I don't know what it is about math, but it's like not as required like in this country, whereas like in other countries, like the level of sophistication is required at like a much like earlier level. Like I'm talking like high school.
So part of it I think is cultural. So for example, in China and like India, if you're good at math, you're viewed as like a good person. Like it's a desirable cultural characteristic. Like you're smart if you do math. In America, being good at math is like you're weird. Everybody likes to joke, right? Everyone always says, "Oh, I'm terrible at math," and like they say that.
I've never understood that.
And they laugh, and I'm like, "You're telling me you're stupid," and then people laugh about you being dumb. Like I don't understand. But it's like Americans think that it's like, oh, it's just too much for us, and we're all bad at math. Like it's culturally acceptable, I think, to not be good at math. And so I think a lot of people that would be good at it as a younger age get that kind of cultural education, and then they just veer away from it, which is part of the problem.
I find that so unfortunate though. Like people would just like rationalize things for like the most like ridiculous things. Like, you know what? Like maybe I'm just not like a history person. Like like what does that mean? Like you just need to like spend more work on like the content. Like
yep. Or maybe it was a bad teacher. Maybe your teacher was a terrible person and just made it boring.
Like I feel like a lot of people like don't ask why. They just come like to a conclusion based on like on a whim.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most disappointing, I guess, realizations I've come to is the average person is far, I don't know how to say this politically correct. They're far happier being less educated. Like for me, I look around and I keep thinking like, I'm just average, maybe below average. Like I'm not a genius. I'm not super smart. Right? I'm just average. And then I keep looking around for people. And it's like, where are the people that are going to conversate? Well, who's going to have a conversation with me? And it's like, you can't find people that have interesting conversations. And it's not even on something specific. Cause like I'm a beekeeper as well. So I can go to like beekeeping organizations and you'll find like one person in a room of like 30 or 40 people that actually understand beekeeping. Everybody else there is just there to like, I have bees, I kind of do it. I don't really know what I'm doing. And I feel like I go everywhere that way. Like you go to like, I don't know, a business conference and yet nobody really understands business. And it's just really sad. Like people just don't have like that passion and desire. Like if you're going to do something, enjoy it, spend time doing it. If not, just don't do it.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I kind of think of that too. Like, I think one of the things is that, at least what I noticed from my friends, people will say a lot of things and not actually do it. Especially if you're asking them to commit to something. They'll promise you the world, but unless they sign that engagement letter, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. And it's just a big problem. I just see a lot of people just, I don't know, I just feel like people nowadays are lost. Like they don't know what they want to do. They know it's like popular to say something, but not to actually complete it. And I think that's just kind of a tragedy in itself of trying to figure out how do you motivate younger people to kind of keep that excitement for learning you had when you were younger as you move forward. And just going back to that big picture thing, like what excites you might be something that excites someone different. So maybe you love geology And so you should go out and pursue that. But it's like people don't really, they don't think about it. They just looking for that shortcut. Like, I just want to make money and go out and just kind of watch TV and not do much, or go on vacation, which is great. But it's like trying to find something you enjoy doing that can also make money is kind of like the challenge I think people should be focusing on.
Where do you think the shortcut kind of like mentality came from? Do you think the rise of like technology like kind of did it? Because it's all that convenience, like technology at this point, right? Like convenience kind of took away. Convenience kind of made it more that issue.
I think it's social media in the sense too that everybody has an opinion, but nobody knows anything. So it's super frustrating when you, like, for example, you spend time, you make a video and it's like super technical and you'll post it. And people are like, oh, this isn't how you do it. This makes no sense. And they like just like brush you off as if they already know everything. And I think it's part of social media now. You can go out and find, I mean, we'll take an example. Flat earthers. People that think the world is flat. Like, how do you even get to that conclusion? I mean, in the past, right, crazy people like that existed. We all know that. But they were like scattered. Like everybody was in their parents' basement, like not admitting it because you were a crazy person.
Their parents' basement.
But now you can go online and you can find groups of them, like hundreds and thousands of people.
On Reddit or something.
That actually believe that.
Mama's basement on Reddit. I wonder if that's an actual like group.
Probably is.
But I was just very curious because I remember watching one of your videos and you were I did bring it up earlier. It was about why professional to talk back to you, but it was about something you said late in the video, which I found very interesting. And I didn't really know this was a thing because you said it was very common, and it's people reaching out to you like aggressively in a sense. And do you want to go into that a little bit? Because like when you said it was common, I was like, is that really? Like I didn't really know that.
I'll give you an example, and this isn't even a person. This is like a grouping of people.
Okay.
So it's like, hey, Dimitri, I'm a big subscriber of your channel. I love your videos, wanted to connect with you here. Like it could be Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever. So I'm like, okay, like, hey, thanks for subscribing and being a part of the channel. Feel free to message me your questions. Unfortunately, I can't take phone calls. So they go, okay, great. So they message me and say, okay, like I'm interested in quantitative finance and I'm wanting to know what degree I should get. Like, okay. I was like, start up to asking questions like, so what is your background? Do you have an undergrad? Are you like in high school? Are you preparing for that? Are you already in undergrad, going into grad school? Like, what is your background? And they'll say like, well, I'm studying finance or something at a university. So like, okay, great. So then I ask the question, why do you want to do quantitative finance? Like, what's the motivation for that? And then they'll tell you like, oh, I want to do it because, I've heard it pays really well and I've heard finance is dying. And so I think the only route in finance is quantitative finance. So like,
why not tech?
That's a good answer, but we'll go with it. So like, okay, so like, what parts of finance are you enjoying? And like, what would be your dream job? And then they tell you like, oh, I want to work at like an investment banking firm and I want to talk to people and I want to work with people and it'd just be great to make a lot of money. So I'm like, okay. So I go, well, the best degree for you to get would be to go and get a finance degree, then move on and try to get an MBA from a top name school. And then you could land a job in an investment banking one. Then they respond back and go, why would you suggest business school to me? I don't want to go to business school. I want to be a quant. And then you're just like frustrated, like, okay.
Do you want my advice or not?
Yeah, it's like, you don't want to be a quant, you want to be an investment banker. And they go, no. And then they start arguing with you. No, Dimitri, being a quant is an investment banker. And I'm like, now we're not even talking the same language. Like now you're just making terms up. So then you have to explain to them kindly, like, hey, like investment banking, like this is what an investment banking job is. Here's a link to a website that talks about this. And then you try to give them more. And they go, okay, well, really, I just want to become rich. Dimitri, how do you become rich? And I'm just like, why am I the expert on becoming rich all of a sudden when I've never claimed anything of wealth or anything on here?
Bet against the housing market.
Yeah, exactly. Then you try to explain to them, like, do what makes you passionate. Do something exciting. And then they go, okay, well, I want to do this. And then it's like, you end up in this weird realm where it's like you're like going back and forth and around in circles and you can never answer their question because I think what they want you to tell them is like, this job is the best job in the world. And if you have this job, you're better than everybody else. And I can guarantee you're going to make at least $10 million a year doing this job. And like, they want you to give them like this super rigid black and white, like response. And it's like, that's not how the world works. And just because I'm successful doesn't mean you're going to be successful. It's like trying to explain this to people is hard, and you get these people and they argue with you, and it's not even one person. It's like an entire group of people. I've had people, the other frustrating one is they say, I want to go to this university program. What do you think? I'm like, well, that program's not very good for that, for X, Y, and Z. And, you know, they don't, for example, quantitative finance, it's all business classes. There's hardly any math in the course. But I mean, if you want to go to it, like, maybe you could turn it into something. Like, that's an option. And they go, no. This is the best program in like my country. This is the best program in the United States. And I'm just like, no, no, it's not. So you keep arguing with them back and forth, trying to explain to them, like, these are the pros of the program and this is why it's good. Like, maybe it's located near New York City, or maybe it has good alumni connections, but like, these are the cons you need to consider. And they'll argue with you until you tell them, like, your school and university is the best program out there and I think you should go to it.
See, my problem with that, and I kind of got into the habit too. I mean, I have two responses to that. One, I think people who ask those questions are people who've never actually like had like an experience before. Because from my personal view, is that when you actually have an experience, you start to understand a little bit about the industry you're in, and a little bit about some of the responsibilities that you like, and then from there, you kind of like in the back of your head start to develop some of the traits that you want. So, for instance, like I wanted to do everything because I never had a job. So I took anything. Yeah. And so when I worked in software engineering, I was like, okay, I realized that I really don't like the technical aspects of things because it's not really around the clients and stuff. So that's a start. So I know I don't want to do software engineering. So then I did fintech and I was like, okay, like fintech is cool. I'll read about it, but I don't like to work that much, if I'm going to be completely honest. And so when I worked as an institutional asset management analyst, I was like, I like this because it's my job to follow the markets. It's my job to analyze portfolios, like understand client, like how to customize clients' IPS statements and et cetera. Like you need to have like some sort of foundation to even have that conversation. And then the second thing is I did this too when I was looking at law school, because I was considering going to law school for a little bit. It's not off the table yet. I'm not sure yet, but we'll see. The interest is there, and if it makes sense for me to do it, I'm going to do it, but we'll see. We'll cross the bridge when we get there. But speaking of crossing the bridge, I think that people like to, or I did it too, people like to try to scope out schools they want to get into, but like me personally, you'll waste a lot of time doing that because it just makes sense to wait until you cross that bridge, then see what you actually have, and then applying to it, because then you just get into all these hypotheticals.
Yeah. I don't know, I feel like I spend the time trying to explain to people, like, right, trying to feel who they are. Like, what do you like doing? Do you like to work with people? Do you like the technical side? Trying to grasp it so you can give them like very custom advice. But I think a lot of times people already have like a preconceived notion in their mind before they ask the question, and they're really just looking for confirmation bias. Like, I think you're really smart, so please tell me that I'm making good decisions. I think that's like the motivation behind the question. But then it's like, as a person, right, you're stuck in a catch-22. I either give you good advice or I give you bad advice. But either way, like I go against my morals by giving you bad advice. But if I give you good advice, then I can never answer the question the way you want it.
You know, it's funny. Now that I think about it, I kind of was that person, not the aggressive person that you're describing. That's kind of like a little extra, like kind of arguing with people on LinkedIn. Like that's a little extra. I would never do that. But for when I definitely was like, or no, I think the reason why I asked that question is because I was looking up positions at companies I would want to work for. And I saw that sometimes someone maybe not went to like a top MBA school. And then I was like, and then I'll reach out to that person and be like, in your opinion, like I saw that you went to this school without kind of like being without hinting at some sort of disrespect, because I'm not trying to be, that maybe it's not like a top school. So how did you leverage that into getting like what you wanted? It was worth paying the money without actually asking that, like kind of hinting at it, like having them ask it to themselves so they can tell me. And so I just wanted to get like that perspective. Like, I don't know, like arguing with people on LinkedIn, like you have to like understand, like you have some sort of like reputation to maintain, because it's like a professional network in a sense. Yeah. And eventually you might need that network one day. Like, it's so funny. Until I always thought, I'm gonna be honest, I thought LinkedIn was the most useless thing. Because for one, like I saw myself just adding people on there, and then you're not doing anything with anything. It's like a baseball cards, like you just keep them just to have them. But then like it becomes useful. It's just like a lot of things. It becomes useful when you actually want to use it for something. So when I started this podcast, I was like, okay, I need people on, and I was like, wait a second, I have LinkedIn, and I have over like 600 something connections. So I was like, I'm gonna put that to use. And so that's when it became useful. So I was like, okay, now I have something to work with.
Yeah, I think most people just don't leverage it. It's like,
Yeah.
I guess the biggest issue in life in general is you need to put in the work when you don't need it.
Yeah.
And then when you need it, you've already done it. And I think that's hard to explain to people because it's like networking with people when you don't need things. It's like, okay, like we're good friends and like, you know, we've met on LinkedIn and I've had a nice introduction or whatever. And then like someone messages me like later and says, hey, like, would you come on a podcast or would you look at a resume for me? I'm like, sure, right? I've had an interaction with you. I can see it on my LinkedIn messaging. Like you were nice and friendly at the beginning. I don't remember who you are because it's been like 2-3 years or whatever. The person that messages you. And then you're like, oh, sure. Like I'm more than happy to help. But I think like if you just randomly found somebody and you just messaged them like, hey, would you like review my resume for me? Most people would be like, I don't know who you are. Like,
You know, it's funny.
this helps lay the groundwork.
I actually did that for this product manager who worked at Amazon. And I'm telling you, people in tech are so nice. To my amazement, he was like, sure, send over your resume.
Yeah. Some people are nice and they'll do it, but I think in general, if you lay the groundwork over time, it just makes all your interactions a lot smoother.
I think for messaging on LinkedIn, I just kind of became more strategic about it because for one, like, I think you have to kind of treat people like at least a strategy in the mindset of reaching out to people on LinkedIn. It's kind of very similar to meeting with clients for the first time. Like the one thing I learned is that, I mean, I think it's kind of common knowledge, like to a certain extent, but when you first meet the client, from what I've learned at least, that you don't actually talk about business at all. It's kind of like you just talk nonsense, like how's the wife, how's the kids, how was the Yankee game, who'd you go with, blah, blah, blah. And then the next time you meet with them, then you kind of get into nitty gritty because you really establish some rapport. So it's kind of,
That drives me nuts. I take a similar approach. I like to talk about people up front to like get you relaxed and like, and I try to remember it. My dad is like the best salesperson because he can talk to someone like 5 years ago and he'll remember their wife's name, their kids' names, like what school they went to, all this stuff. I don't know how, but he can do it. But for me, it's like I like to open the conversation with it, like, oh, how was your weekend? You know, how was your wife? How are your kids? How's the vacation you went on? Whatever. And then I segue into the business part. But the biggest thing, like, if people just want to chat to be friendly up front to build a relationship, I'm always like I'm busy. I got stuff to do. Like, that's what the chase. But this might be a quant perspective because quants are a lot more, they lack social skills. So quants are like, when you get in a room, like they want to just do math and like solve the problem quickly and everybody goes home.
I think that's for every technical position, to be honest.
Yeah, and the business people come in and it's like they've got their coffee and like, you know, how's the weekend? And it could be like a 3-hour ordeal before you get going. I think it's just, I think it's a cultural kind of technical perspective there.
Right? And that software engineering is very like that too, because I learned that firsthand. Because when I went to that Capital One program, I was the only person there that was not only not a computer science major, I was also the only person who taught myself how to program. And that was like kind of like frowned upon there. Like it's kind of like, it's not like looked as like as the same. Like you're like it's just different. Like everything, like it's all about like how do I explain it? I think honestly, he hit on the head, but it's pretty much like, look, I got work to do.
Yeah.
Like if I just want to get it done, to be honest.
Yeah, and on that point, I don't think a lot of people realize your education follows you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it really does.
And I think that's a big key. Like quants, it's like I've had people that worked at banks that have been quants up undergrads, which is really shocking. It's like it's career suicide. Because you go to interview with us, like we won't even consider you. Like, oh, you have an undergrad degree and you've worked for 5 years at another bank doing quantitative research. Like, nope, we just toss you. It's just the bare minimum. You have to have that master's degree at minimum. And even firms prefer only to interview PhDs. So I think having like that education, having that school name on your resume, really going through the strenuous process makes a huge difference.
Do you think a PhD is worth it? Like all that school, like they're pretty much paying you in a sense, but like, do you think it's worth it?
This is a hard one. If you enjoy doing academic research, it's worth it. It's really worth it. You just do a lot more hands-on research and like you dig deeper. And I think for example, quant research is an area where they mainly only hire PhDs because you have experience literally only doing research. Like that's what a PhD is.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
But one of the issues you run into with PhDs a lot of times is they think that they're here and that like coding is beneath them. Like I don't do that work. We had graduate assistants to do that. When you get into the industry, it's like I don't really care. You could have a PhD, you could have 10 PhDs. I need this work done and I need the nitty-gritty details sorted out, and you're gonna code it. And a lot of them have that struggle of like, you're the same as a master's student, but in many ways they prefer them just because you typically have a deeper understanding and you can hire them at the same rate.
Very interesting. Yeah. But I have a quick question. So I ran into this interesting conversation about, I'm gonna call it company versus job. And so I bring that up because there are some people who, I think it's very, very popular in finance. I think in any industry, actually. Maybe not consulting. Maybe it is. Yeah. But people just want to work at the top banks or the top companies or like Amazon, Google, Facebook. And they won't really care what the position is. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes people will trade off. If like sometimes they'll have opportunities to do like, let's say asset management, but then you work at Goldman Sachs as some like compliance officer. So what do you think, job or company over job or job over company?
So for anything technical, it's job over company. For business jobs, so I view them as non-technical, company over job.
Really?
Yeah. The reason being, I mean, like Goldman Sachs so I've always liked Goldman Sachs, and one of the reasons is I think Lloyd Blankfein is probably the best CEO that's ever been in banking. He's so charismatic when he interviews, and like you can relate with him, and like you feel like he's really listening and he's caring, and yet he gets good profits. And I've heard like behind closed doors, he's like cutthroat and he gets it done. He has like that traditional Wall Street personality of like, we're gonna get in there and we're gonna make money and we're gonna figure out how to do it. Where now I think too many CEOs are kind of like puppets. But for business jobs, like Goldman's notorious for like hiring like an English major. Mm-hmm. And like you're an English major from Harvard. But what they're really looking for in a lot of the business jobs is I can teach you to do anything.
Exactly.
It's not super technical, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't build on itself like math would build. So I can teach you to do it. If you're just a really smart person and you're motivated, you could fit any job, minus the technical ones. And so I think that's where if you come into like a lot of these firms, it doesn't matter as long as you get your foot in the door, and then you can kind of network with people and you can work between different departments and move around. And even I've had opportunities to go into different areas of the bank because it's like they can teach you to do anything. But one of the things that you never see, and HR complains about it constantly, and other departments complain about it, is everyone wants to move into that quant finance realm. And it's like, we can't take you because the amount of training it would take me to train you would be like a full-time job. Yeah.
It's not something you can learn quickly. Like take some like Wall Street Mojo like DCF like course. It's like months worth of work because like it's more foundational knowledge than it is like the skills like doing like a certain task like a DCF or some sort of comparable analysis.
Yeah, and the business I always ask me, Dimitri, I work in validation. We validate something and I tell you this fails and this wasn't done correctly. And then they resubmit a new model and then I say, okay, well these 10 other things are wrong now. And then they go, okay, fine, we'll resubmit. They resubmit and I go, these 10 other things are wrong. They go, why do you keep picking random things? Like you're just randomly like picking things out from us. Like we just want to pass this model. And it's like hard to explain to them, like the amount of knowledge it takes to build a model is massive. So when I review it, the first model you did, everything was right except for these 10 things. Then when you went to rebuild, you made 10 other mistakes. You fixed your first mistakes, but you made 10 other mistakes. And then you go to your third one, now you made 10 other mistakes. It's like, it's hard to explain. Like I can't lay out for you on a sheet of paper the qualifications you need. It's like, I need one of these massive textbooks and be like, hey, read this whole thing and then get back to me. Like,
you know, that just reminded me of something that I learned during my internship, and you hear this term all the time. Like, we need people who can communicate. We need people who can communicate, and we need people who can communicate. And you hear that word all the time, and it's like, at first I was like, what does that mean? Like, I can send an email and like I can talk to you. But then like once you start to understand, and I think everyone starts to realize this, especially during like their first internship, is when they say communicate, they really mean like ask any questions that you have now, because whatever I was supposed to tell you to do, I'm gonna kind of forget all the details of it. So ask me questions so it reminds me to tell you everything you need to do now, so you don't ask me later on when you get stuck. And that's a huge difference, because like when I at first like I didn't really understand that, but then once like I would do assignments and I'm like stuck, I'm like, what am I missing? And I'll ask a question like, oh, I kind of forgot to tell you this, and it's kind of like, well, if you told me that like when I started, I could have had this done in like 2 hours. And I was like, you know what? Maybe like at first I was like, this is ridiculous, but then I was like, you know what? Like maybe it is like kind of a little on me, because I should have like some questions prepared in advance just so this doesn't happen again. Like so, I guess like that understanding what that definition of communication is goes such a long way, because it saves you so much stress and so much like frustration, because it's like, oh, you should have told me.
I think part of this too is that humans are terrible at looking at themselves.
Yeah.
I've been reading Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules of Life, or whatever, his book. You had that book too?
I had that book, yeah. I don't know where it is.
So he mentions in, I think, that book or one of his interviews, that being someone who's creative, like truly, honestly creative, is super, super rare.
What does he mean by creative? Like, has he explained that in that part?
No. It's just about like creativity. Like someone that can create like a unique solution to a problem.
Okay.
But finding someone truly creative is super, super rare. And when I read that, it resonated with me, kind of like with the communication thing and like quant finance and all these skills you need. Everybody thinks like they're a hard worker. They communicate well.
Everybody.
They're creative. And it's like, if you think about this on like let's look at everybody around you and we rank everybody in a hierarchy. It's kind of a Jordan Peterson idea here. You're probably at the bottom. And it's like weird to think like something as simple, right, as communication, like you need to spend years honing it. And you have to like work on it. You can't just like float through life and like send emails and chat with people. It's like you have to actually think about the problem and think like, right, you're talking about like, okay, I missed this one point. If I would have asked this question, like it would have made it easier. So it's like, so how do I think about that next time when I have a meeting about a problem? And I think that's the problem with people in general. Like everyone's overly confident, but no one stops to really like sit and internalize themselves. Like I'm not that great of a person. I need to improve.
And another thing that people love to do, especially in business, is pointing the finger. Pointing the finger has to be like the number one thing. Is as common as brushing your teeth. Like it really is. Like people like for the most ridiculous things. Like I remember, I'm not gonna say which internship it was because I don't want to burn any bridges, but there was an internship where I had to get something done, and I was sent a document that explained how to do whatever it was I was going to do, because when I did it, I kind of left some parts out, a little minor parts. But then when I pointed that out, that I didn't receive that document, they got frustrated saying that we sent an email blank by blank. And I was like, okay, wait a second. I'm going to go through my email. What's the name of the document? I looked it up. I didn't get it. And so I told them that, because I told them that because they're allowed to look at your, like what's in your inbox or whatever, because like it's part of their system. So they can see it. So if they want to check, it's not like they're like, it's like a NSA kind of thing. But I was like, okay, well, I just looked for it and I don't have it. Is there maybe a different name with it? And then instead of the answer, it's like, oh, maybe I didn't send it. And maybe it didn't send it. The answer was, oh, well, you should have asked for it. And I was like, I can't ask for something that I don't know exists.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a certain point where this communication's got to work better. It really does.
And I think that's the key part for building careers is how do you avoid getting the finger pointed at you? It's why I'm so anal about making sure everything is exactly right. Like all the quantitative work I do, all the documentation I write, I have to review everything like 10 times because I want to make sure that someone doesn't come back and go like, this thing was screwed up and you didn't do it. Why didn't you do it? It's your fault.
And the frustrating part is like, look, listen, like I'm not trying to be like right or wrong here. Like I like you. Like I want to work with you. Just like if you didn't send it, then you didn't send it. Just send it to me. But like but then like don't point the finger at me, because for one, like I can't do much because I'm an intern. And two, it's really like I don't want to say it's inappropriate, but like you should probably have the responsibility to understand that if you said you did something and you didn't, and then try to blame it on someone else, and that's not exactly fair.
Yeah, we have, I don't know how to say this without burning too many bridges, but we've had situations where that happens, and like the easiest out would have been if whoever made the mistake at the beginning said, oh, hey, like I screwed up, I didn't send it, or I screwed up and I didn't do this. I'm like, oh, okay, great. Like, let's just fix it now. But we've had situations in the industry where it's like someone will fight you to the death on it. And it's like, it has to be done. So like, it has to be finished. Like, I don't have any other choice but to finish this the correct way. And they'll insist that it was done or it's not done incorrectly. And you end up in these massive arguments and fights. And it's a lot of the politics behind the scenes of like, just do your job. And like, if you're like, I'm wrong all the I mean, I offended a colleague once. I'll give you an example. I offended a colleague. I didn't have to apologize, right? It would have been nice for me to do, but I didn't have to. I contacted him and I was like, hey, dude, I said this. I'm really sorry. Like, I'm honestly sorry because this could have been taken super offensively. And he was like, oh, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. But it's like trying to admit when you're wrong, or even when you offend someone and you might not realize it. And then you think about it later and you're like, that probably wasn't the most professional thing to say. Like, being able to go back and say like, hey, I screwed up, I think is a huge skill that most people they just don't do it. And it's embarrassing. It's like, if you just admit it up front, then you don't have issues later down the road.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for that, I mean, I'm trying to think if I've ever had to done that. I mean, there was one instance where I don't know what the instance was actually, but basically they were trying to tell me something, and because, actually, no, I can't say that because I'll give it away. But basically, I was given feedback, and the expressions on they couldn't really see my prediction. I can't say that. Whatever. But basically, the way they heard what I was saying and my response to it, they took it in a negative tone when really I was like, maybe they kind of misinterpreted my reaction to it. So then I was like, look, like maybe I came off like blah blah blah, etc. Maybe I didn't. But like I just want to make sure we're straight, like etc. etc. And so
yeah,
that's the end of that. I mean, that's the best thing you could do, honestly, because otherwise, like, you have to work with that person. I mean, the worst thing you want to do is like have a better relationship.
Yeah, I agree.
But I wanted to ask you, so when you work, so you start off in traditional finance, you left. Did you ever think of starting up your own hedge fund?
I did. So I had the delusional finance theory that everybody has. I left finance. I was going to do quant finance, and I was going to be like a super genius. And I thought to myself, like, I'm going to go start a hedge fund afterwards.
Everyone has that.
Yeah.
Everyone
and
has that.
The more you interview with hedge funds, the more you talk to people in the industry, you start realizing like there's so many pieces, it's hard to put it all together. Like, because you have to file all the legal paperwork and you have to create a corporation, which isn't too bad. I've done stuff like that. But then you have to meet FINRA and you have to have an SEC license and you have to get people that are licensed to trade for you. And how do you get the licensing for that? So you have to go through all that process. And then I've interviewed and talked to people that have actually ran hedge funds and failed. And so you start finding out like you can't have a really good strategy because within a period of time, it's going to disappear. So you make money for 3 months, 6 months. By the time it disappears, if you don't understand how to monitor that theory and that strategy, and you don't detect it going bad before it goes bad, you go bankrupt. And I've seen multiple people do it. It's not even like an uncommon thing. People have a good idea. It makes good returns. They bring in investors. They go through all this headaches of setting up accounting departments and traders and research and all this, and they bring it all in. They execute the idea. They make money for 3 months, 6 months, and then it goes up, belly up, and you go bankrupt. And so I think it's really hard to explain to people, like, you have to know the microstructure of the markets. You have to know the legal atmosphere. You have to know the trading. You have to know accounting, right? You have to have an accountant to do your payroll. You have to have servers and IT staff, right? You can't just set servers in a room and it magically hooks everything up together and it works. Like, you have to have licenses to connect to the exchanges. Data costs you millions of dollars to get data from actual sources. And by the time you're done looking at it, it's like millions of dollars just to get going.
Yeah, that's so true. And like the thing about hedge funds too, and I could be wrong about the amount here, but the reason why they can kind of get away with what they do is because they're in like the little shadow banking system, and because the minimum amount I think, is it the net worth? I think no, it's not the minimum net worth. Is the minimum net worth over $1 million for each client?
Your net worth, excluding your house, I believe, has to be over 100,000.
Oh, 200, that one. It's 200,000.
Maybe it's 100 or 200, somewhere in there, but yeah.
It's 200,000. So it has to be 200,000. And so because that number by I think it's the SEC, because they're deemed to be more, what word did they use? More sophisticated than the typical.
More financially stable and educated
exactly.
in financial markets and
Yeah, and so that too. And so it's like, well, how many people of that can I find? Because I forget where I saw this, but there was a 16-year-old kid from UPenn. Is it UPenn? No, he was in high school when he started the hedge fund. He was on the lacrosse team and everything, and he was still doing the hedge fund in UPenn. I'm like, how is a 16-year-old kid like starting a hedge fund while he's in high school? Like, how does that work? And who are your investors? Because you have to meet all these regulations, like you said.
Yeah,
it's super.
I've learned that if you have a good strategy, finding money is not hard. It's finding a risk-adjusted return that you can consistently prove that you can make to convince people to put the money in that's hard.
That's so hard to do nowadays.
Yeah.
So when you thought about it, did you have, I'm not sure if you want to talk about it, but did you have a strategy, or is it kind of like you don't want to throw it out there just because it's still a potential window that you might want to explore?
No, I started doing research, but the more I got into actual financial engineering applications, you start realizing I don't have the data. Like, I need data to look at, to review this, to create a strategy. And if you're using like daily stock data online, it's worthless. Like, everybody has that data. It's way too broad. You're not like, I need like minutely or secondly transactions. I need the bid-ask spreads. There's a lot of stuff you need to incorporate into that modeling. And to get that, like, you can contact someone like Bloomberg and it's like $1 million. It'd be like 100-something thousand for the terminals. And then if you want different data, you spend millions of dollars for different sets of data. So the data part is super expensive. So it's like, even if you're a genius, you need the money to explore it, to come up with an idea.
So it is, because I was wondering, like, I remember I was doing something and I was like, I want to know what the returns were at the S&P, like, at this month, this month, like, X amount of years ago. But then when you look it up, like, Google, like, doesn't really show you that. So I was like, where did I find it? And then you realize, like, you come up with FactSet, Bloomberg, and all that stuff. But I didn't know to pay for minutely transactions, it's millions of dollars.
I have no idea what it actually costs, but I can tell you from a banking perspective, if we want some special macroeconomic variable. So I worked on the economics department as a side job. So it wasn't in my wheelhouse, but I was qualified to do it, so they had me do it. Working with one of the vendors to supply the data, they wanted $1.6 million for one series of data. Mm-hmm. So just one set of numbers that they forecast out for one set of, so it's the historicals plus the forecast. It was like over $1 million, 1.6, 1.4.
Jesus.
So I can't imagine FactSet would be handing out data pretty cheap, but who knows, maybe they do stock data cheaper because there's so many people wanting it.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of demand for that.
But I think I remember it was like 150,000 for, I think, a Bloomberg terminal.
But people are shying away from equities now because, for one, a lot of public companies are starting to go private, and two, alternative investments are kind of taking a turn from the better. I mean, on a year, it depends how you measure it, because the way you measure returns in alternative markets is different from how you do in public markets. But on average, I think public markets return, correct me if I'm wrong, ballpark 8.5%. I want to say a year. And then alternative investments, it's around 11 to 12%. But they use a different metric to measure the returns because it's different. But I was interested to read. I was reading this article, and my conclusion from it is that I think a lot of fund managers are starting to understand the importance of alternative investments, because the Yale endowment, 75% of their entire endowment is allocated to alternative investments, and 40% of it is private equity, which is a lot for considering that alternative investments is considered it has a good amount of risk in it, because there's not a lot of liquidity in it. So, it's not very safe, per se.
There's pros and cons, and I think it's hard to explain. I have a lot of people say, Dimitri, what is the best investment? The best investment is a diversified portfolio. Because if you look at different time frames, right? Stock market beats alternative in this time frame, then alternative beats it in
different time frame. That's so true.
It's so hard to predict it. And I think if you look at, like, even a lot of quant funds, they have a massive diversified base in their capital. that's tracking the market. And then they have a chunk of capital they're using to do quantitative finance because they still want to make sure they're tracking the market. And then they're just trying to fudge their profits up a little bit with the quantitative methods.
You know, that actually, something interesting just popped in my head, because nowadays, like, you see you see a surge in more individual investors. So I'm talking about Robinhood people here. So that kind of throws off the dynamics of traditional, like, market. I'm going to call them market swings. Because for one, let's talk about distressed investing. There are some companies that went bankrupt, and then usually when company goes bankrupt, their stocks kind of tank too. But for whatever reason, recently, a lot of company stocks that go bankrupt, they perform well for whatever reason when they go bankrupt. And if you remember, even Hertz tried to offer hundreds of $1 million of shares, and offering shares that kind of got frowned upon by the SEC, so they didn't really go through with it. But it just goes to show, like, some people understand the opportunity, I guess, if you want to call it, that's kind of arising in here.
Yeah, there's restructuring methods and things that can keep bankruptcy alive, and that's what a lot of people bet on. But like retail traders make like a teeny fraction of the whole market.
Yeah, they really, because it's institutional investors, pretty much that.
Yeah, because I mean, think about everyone's 401k. That's all managed by an institution.
Yeah, exactly.
And then all these giant banks are managing all this money, and it just really dwarfs the retail markets. But
yeah, 100%. It's funny. Before we were talking about, I think we talked about ties earlier. I'm not sure if we did. But Brooks Brothers went bankrupt. I was so disappointed when they went bankrupt, because all my favorite ties are from Brooks Brothers.
Okay.
They're very nice ties. I mean, I have one, like, you ever buy, they have like this Christmas limited edition tie.
Okay.
I don't know why I bought it, because I never actually worn it, because I thought it was blue, but it was green, and I couldn't find the box, so I couldn't really return it. But I was like, whatever, it's like a nice like Christmas tie, so I'll keep it. But I was so disappointed when they went bankrupt. I mean, are they out of business, or is it just Chapter 11?
I don't remember. I think it might be Chapter 11 for now, but I didn't look and see. I saw the news though that they went bankrupt, and it was like a bunch of other firms were all going during the crisis.
I know Red Robin Hood went, or not Red Robin Hood. Is it Red Robin, the what's it called, the food?
The eating place?
Yeah. They went bankrupt too, right?
Yeah, I think so.
A lot of places are going bankrupt.
Yeah.
Do you think major airlines gonna go bankrupt?
Yeah, I can see it coming.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they kind of got saved in that time period where they were going up like 16%, even though they were burning $1 million in cash. I think we would have seen it there if it was going to happen, but I guess they kind of got saved by retail investors, because their stocks were going up. Was it 16% a week or a day? Something ridiculous like that. But they were skyrocketing. They had a good upturn, but then I think things kind of adjusted. There's a correction for sure.
Yeah, they'll definitely come down.
Yeah, but Dimitri, time went by really fast. But I think why don't we end on a good note here? I think it's
okay.
Great. Yeah. So Dimitri, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I think some of the better interviews tend to be where I'm feeding off their energy and they're feeding off mine. They're asking